Story 1. Caught my brother's fiancée cheating, but nobody believed me and cut me off. Years later, they found out I was right but only reached out because they needed me to testify in his divorce. 3 years ago, I, 30M, had tried to get my brother, 35M, to call off his wedding after I discovered his fiancée, 33F, cheating on him. Unfortunately, nobody in the family paid any heed to what I said, and they got married anyway. On top of that, they even got the family to cut me off by branding me as jealous and someone who couldn't stand to see my brother happy. Since then, I've had absolutely no contact with my family, and they didn't make any attempts to get in touch with me either. Until recently. A couple of days ago, they showed up because obviously my brother was getting divorced, and they needed me to testify because he didn't want to pay child support. However, I have flat out refused to help them, and now I'm being called heartless and selfish. This time, on one hand, I feel pretty self-satisfied that I'm getting to turn them down, and I feel like this is the closure that I needed. But on the other hand, a lot of my friends have told me that I'm going to regret this in the future because this is the one chance I might get to mend my relationship with my family, and if I reject them now, I might never get this chance again. So, I'm quite conflicted on what to do. What if I didn't testify in family court in favor of my brother? For those of you who would like to know more details, here's the full story. The full story. My brother, let's call him Mickey, and his fiancée, let's call her Na, had been together for 2 years when they got engaged. I wasn't particularly close to Mickey, never really had been, because we had a very intense sibling rivalry growing up, and that kind of got in the way of our relationship as brothers, even as adults. I constantly found myself competing with him, even subconsciously. The sad part was that my parents never did much to discourage it either, so even they were aware of the fact that I didn't like my brother much, and I resented the fact that he was treated better than me just because he was doing better than me. To be fair, back then I was kind of naive, and I believed that at least family shouldn't judge you on the basis of how you're doing in life. They should have some degree of impartiality, especially when it comes to siblings. But of course, now I know that it's all rubbish. People judge you for how successful you are no matter what, and that includes family. Anyway, back then I didn't know all these things, and I didn't know how to handle stuff tactfully. I would just say whatever came to my mind. In that way, my parents realized that I had always resented my brother because, even though I hate to admit it, he had been better than me at certain things. Unfortunately, these certain things were the only things that counted for my parents. Since he was good at math and science and stuff, he started working for a growing tech company right after college, which meant that he was also making big bucks, even though he was comparatively younger than his colleagues. It wasn't surprising. He was pretty bright, and with time, his career graph only went up. On the other hand, I was not doing so well for myself. I had chosen to pursue a degree in literature and try my hand at being a writer. I dropped out in my second year because I got depressed after getting to know that I was probably not as good a writer as I had been told right from my childhood. When I was younger, I was pretty mediocre at most subjects, but writing was where I really shined, and I would win all sorts of competitions and stuff. So, at least that way, when we were younger, I was at par with my brother because I had my writing skills to compete with his medals for his projects and stuff like that. However, after I dropped out of college, I started trying to strike out on my own somehow and tried my hand at being a freelance copywriter. I was barely making enough to survive on my own, while my brother was doing exceedingly well, and he even started paying back our parents. Naturally, some sort of comparison was bound to happen. Every time the family would get together, my parents would make it a point to remind me that I needed to take my life more seriously, start doing something more respectable as a job. And every lecture about my life always ended with them comparing me to my brother, telling me that I should take a leaf out of his book or some other equally annoying stuff like that. More often than not, I would end up starting a shouting match with them whenever they would say stuff like this, telling them that they were being terrible parents by comparing me to my brother for no reason and that I was tired of them pulling the same stuff over and over again right from my childhood. It was the same old routine. We would fight, we would stop speaking to each other for a couple of weeks, but then they would reach out to me again and we would try to reconcile. Then, of course, Mickey got engaged to his girlfriend of 2 years. I had met her a couple of times when she had visited the family while they were dating. She seemed nice enough. Even during the time that they were engaged, she seemed like a good person. But then, about 2 weeks before the wedding, my family hosted a dinner party at our house. Even though Mickey and I don't get along in person, we had always tried to be amiable to each other for the sake of appearances. I had been an active part of all the events for the wedding, but I wasn't really interested in them, so at some point I decided to go out for a smoke. I still regret the fact that I did so, because that's when I saw Na making out with one of my younger cousins, Jacob, 27M. My parents didn't know that I smoked back then, so I had to walk a little distance away from the house. When I saw Jacob's car, I was a bit confused because he had said that he was going back home. So, I decided to take a peek in to try and figure out what was going on, and that's when I saw them together. I don't know who was more shocked out of all three of us, but I immediately stubbed out my cigarette and started walking back home without even turning back once. Na walked in a couple of minutes later, and Jacob was nowhere to be seen. After that, I'm assuming that he finally actually went home. Luckily, everybody had been drinking, and nobody had noticed that all three of us had been absent, so there was no question of anybody asking us what was going on that night. That night, I didn't say anything to my brother because I hadn't processed anything fully myself. I was still confused as to what I had just seen, and I went back home pretty quickly after that. But Na kept messaging me throughout that night, begging me not to tell Mickey anything about what I had seen. She said that she had only made out with Jacob once, the time that I saw them, and she regretted it a lot and that it would never happen again. She said that she didn't want me to ruin her marriage, that she was fully committed to Mickey, and that she would never make a mistake like this. All she wanted me to do was keep her secret. That night, I thought about everything, and I decided that I was going to have to tell Mickey about what I had seen because, even though we were not exactly the best of friends, I owed him this as his brother. That was the least I could do for him. So, I asked him to meet me for lunch the next day, and I told him everything. He looked shocked and hurt and didn't respond immediately. He just said that he was thankful that I had told him the truth, and then he went back home. After that, I don't know what I was expecting, but I was definitely a little shocked when nobody reached out to me for a couple of days, and then I was totally confused when I realized that everybody from the family had blocked me everywhere. About a week before the wedding, I had no idea what was going on, so I decided to try and visit my parents, but they refused to even open the door, and I was left with no other choice but to visit Mickey himself, because I was sure that he had something to do with this. And he definitely did open the door, but it was only to insult me. As soon as he saw me outside, he started making nasty faces at me and asked me to leave. I was very confused by his behavior because the last time that we had spoken, he had been thankful to me for being honest with him. Now, though, he was singing a different tune and told me that he knew that I was just trying to ruin his relationship with Na because I was a miserable person myself, and that's why I'd cooked up this horrible story about her and Jacob just to create drama out of nothing. It was extremely hurtful that he would even say something like this, but I knew that Na had probably convinced him that I was lying. So I didn't respond to him. Since I knew that there was no talking to him anymore, I turned around and left. Later on that day, I received a message from my parents, who had unblocked me only so they could tell me that they didn't want me to reach out to them again, because I was just a miserable and jealous liar who was trying to ruin my brother's life and marriage simply because I had nothing of my own, and he was doing so well in life. They said that they had always known that I was resentful of my brother because he was so successful, but to go out of my way to make up such horrible lies about his wife and claim that she had been cheating on him just so that they would call off the wedding was disgusting. They told me that I was being disgusting and they wanted nothing to do with me anymore. It was pretty obvious that Na had played them, and they actually believed her and not their own son. So I had nothing to say to that. For the next 5 years, I would have nothing to do with my parents or my brother or the rest of my family. To them, I was always just going to be somebody who had tried to ruin my brother's marriage simply because I was insecure. There was nothing that I could do about the image that they had of me, and I was tired of trying, so I just let it go. The past 5 years had been difficult in the beginning because I was really upset about what was going on with me and my family. I suffered from depression in the beginning, but I eventually got better, and now I'm actually doing decently for myself. My work as a copywriter is paying better now since I've spent quite a few years as a part of the industry, and I'm a better known name now. I'm good with whatever I have, and I don't even miss my family that much because I've come to see how toxic they were to me. So, recently, when they showed up at my house asking me to help them out and testify for my brother in family court, I straight up refused. I don't think that I owed anything to them after everything that they had said to me and the way they had treated me since forever. And like I had mentioned at the beginning, my friends believe that I'm going to regret this, so they do think that I should give it a chance. They believe that I should at least talk to my parents and my brother and try to clear the air instead of acting like this. My family also hasn't left any stone unturned to make me feel guilty about my decision. They have been sending me messages and emails constantly, telling me that I'm being heartless and selfish, and also that they had their reasons for cutting me off and believing nah over me back then. And honestly, I can kind of see that point, as much as I hate to admit it. Like I had mentioned in the beginning, I did have a tendency of going off on my parents whenever they would compare me to my brother. So, naturally, my parents believed that I really hated and resented Mickey, which is why when Na told them that I was only making up these awful stories about her to ruin his life, they were bound to believe her. I guess I have already mentioned that I used to get into shouting matches with them every time that they would try to compare me to my brother, and I'm not saying that they were right, but the things that I would say about them and Mickey, they were not very nice either. So, I don't really blame my parents for believing Na back then. And also, I didn't exactly try to fight back for myself either. I just let it all go. So, naturally, they did not try to reach out to me for the next 5 years either, because they believed that I had been lying until they found out about Na's affairs. Anyway, this also factors into why I'm feeling guilty about everything, because I really do think that we could have solved everything as a family if all of us had made an effort, but none of us did. And of course, that includes me, which is why I'm feeling kind of bad about this. I also can't get what my friends said out of my head about this probably being my only chance to mend my relationship with my family. I know people have a lot of things to say about how they can go on without their family, especially when they're as toxic as mine, but I keep having this feeling that I'm making a huge mistake. So, I really need to know if I am the jerk for refusing to help my brother by testifying in his favor in court. Update 1. I've given this situation a lot of thought, and I've decided that I'm not going to be testifying for Mickey. I don't need to do that. I don't even need to repair my relationship with my family because for the past 5 years, I've gotten along just fine without them, and I am sure that I can say the same for them as well. They wouldn't even get in touch with me if it hadn't been for the divorce and the child support thing. Right now, Mickey and Na have been in the process of getting a divorce for the past couple of months. So it's not like they didn't know that I had been telling the truth about Na back then. They knew. They just didn't think it was important enough to reach out to me until they needed my help. That is, Mickey basically just caught Na texting Jacob one day about a couple of months ago, and that's how he found out about the affair. Na insists that the affair has only been going on for a year, and it's only because she had been feeling neglected by Mickey because he had been focusing too much on work. But then a couple of weeks ago, they had a court-ordered paternity conducted on their 1-year-old son, and as it turns out, it's not Mickey's son. Obviously, he has refused to pay child support after the divorce, but Na insists that he continue to support his child financially because for the past 1 year, he has been acting as the father of the child and not Jacob. And here is where I come in because Mickey and my parents want me to help them out to prove that the affair with Jacob had been going on for a lot longer than just 1 year. It has been going on since before they had even gotten married. And they need me to testify against Na so he can get out of paying child support because it's obvious that Jacob, being the real and biological father, has obviously had contact with both Na and the child, so now he needs to step up and be the father. It's a whole thing, and it's honestly kind of complicated. But the bottom line is that Mickey and my parents have known about Na's affair with Jacob for the past few months. So, they knew that I was telling the truth, and they never bothered to get in touch with me. That's what I realized in the past few days while I was thinking about this situation. Eventually, I decided that I did not owe them anything. I'm done with them, and I can just stay away from them the same way that I have for the past 5 years. I haven't replied to any of their desperate messages or emails. I don't even feel the need to do that. But I have spoken to my friends about this since they were the people encouraging me to speak to my family and try to clear the air. Of course, they had my best interests at heart. They did not want me to have any regrets. I felt like I needed to talk to them about this as well, so I told them about my decision, and I could tell that they were not exactly on board with it. But then I explained it as well. I didn't really owe them an explanation, but I offered it nevertheless because for the past 5 years after I had the falling out with my family, they were the only people who have been by my side, and I'm really grateful to them for that. So anyway, I told them all about how I had been treated in the past by my family and how toxic they really were. They had a basic idea of things, but while speaking to them this time around, I really went into detail. I never really talked about it much because it was way too personal and I hated reliving everything, but I felt like I had to tell them so that they could understand exactly how deep everything was for me. I told them all about the insults and stuff when I had told my family the truth about Na, and then finally I told them that the only reason my family had gotten in touch with me right now was because they needed my help. They did not actually value me as a person, and they never will because they have known that I was telling the truth for a few months now, and yet they never bothered to apologize to me for their behavior. As a matter of fact, even now, they haven't exactly apologized to me. They have just gotten defensive, and they even kind of had me fooled for a second because I was actually considering their point of view. But at the end of the day, they should have believed their son over Na, and they didn't. So now if it cost them, it cost them. I can't help it. I had tried to warn Mickey and my parents, but they didn't care about it back then, and instead they insulted me and cut me out of their lives. It would be wrong of me to go back to these people, and I don't want to hurt myself like that anymore, which is why I'm choosing to stay away. And after I spoke my heart out to my friends, they told me that they were obviously going to support me in whatever I chose, and now that they know the entire situation and exactly how I feel about it, they know that I've made the right choice for myself. So everything is good among all of us, and I'm really glad about it. Update 2. So, it's been 2 weeks since my family first showed up at my house trying to get me to help them out. After that, since I did not respond to any of the messages or emails that they sent me, they took it upon themselves to reach out to me once again today. It was the weekend, so I was spending the day at home, and around the afternoon, the bells started ringing nonstop. Obviously, when I looked out, it had to be my family, and I decided that I was going to pretend that I was not even at home. So, I just let the bell ring for a couple of minutes, but then instead of leaving, my father started yelling and said that he knew that I was at home and I needed to talk to them. I don't know how he figured it out, but anyway, I still did not reply for a couple of minutes. My father just kept yelling from outside the door and telling me to open the door, but I did not even move. Eventually, he and Mickey started pushing against the door with all their might, and I was afraid the door might break, so finally I had to get up and open the door. By then, I was already pretty annoyed because I had made it very clear that I wanted to be left alone, and I really did not want to have to call the cops because I live in a nice neighborhood and also I just didn't want to have to deal with the trouble of going through that. So I opened the door, and I made it very clear to them that I did not want to speak to them and I had already made up my mind. I was not going to be helping them out. It wasn't a personal grievance at this point. I just wanted to stay away from them, and they needed to respect that because showing up at my house was not going to get me to change my mind. If anything, it was only going to make me even more upset with them. My parents did not say anything, but Mickey told me that he really needed my help because he did not think it was fair for him to have to pay child support for a kid that was not even his. And if I could help him out, I really should do it because after all, we are family. I burst out laughing at that point because for 5 years, we have been anything but family, and all of a sudden, just because they need my help, we are family and I need to fulfill my duty? I told him very curtly that we couldn't just pretend to be family when it was convenient for them, and I don't consider them family anymore, so they could just get out of my sight now. I guess they didn't like my tone because my parents started losing their minds as soon as I said that. My dad started yelling at me, and my mom told me that I had no right to speak to them that way because in spite of everything, they were still my parents and they had raised me, so I owed them everything. Naturally, I fought back, and within a couple of minutes we were caught up in a shouting match once again. If it hadn't been for Mickey, we probably would have gone on for a really long time, but thankfully he got both of them to stop. Then he turned to me and literally started pleading with me, telling me that he really needed my help and that he knew that he hadn't exactly been the best brother in the past, but he would owe me big time if I helped him out this once. He told me that he didn't even want kids and it didn't seem fair for him to financially support his cheating wife and a child that didn't even belong to him, and that I was the only one who could prevent this injustice from going on. It sounded very dramatic, but I knew that he was desperate and was actually counting on me at that moment. Though after the fight that I had just had with my parents, I literally had no interest in helping any of them, and I just told them to go away or I would call the cops. Then I shut the door, and eventually they did leave. I don't know if I did the right thing or not, but I just hope that they leave me alone after this because I really don't have anything to say to them. I do feel bad for Mickey. I think that if our parents had been better as parents, we might have had a different sort of relationship altogether. I'm not saying that he himself is perfect and had no part to play in any of this, But honestly, I can't help but feel bad for the situation that he is in right now. If he had just listened to me back when I warned him, he would have been able to avoid this entire situation. Even today, I think that it was our parents who ruined the entire situation for him because he might have been able to get me to agree to help him out if our parents had not behaved so badly with me. Anyway, the damage has already been done, and while I really hope that he gets out of paying child support, because honestly speaking, from a strictly moral point of view, I would not like it if Na got him to pay child support. Legally, she doesn't deserve it. I think she's the worst, and I detest her even more than I dislike my parents, and that's really saying something. Besides, ethically speaking, it would not be right for Mickey to have to pay child support, and I stand by that. So, I'm definitely not going to be helping him out, but I do hope that things work out for him now. Update 3. Hey, so it's been 3 months since my last update, and I know that I haven't been active here, but honestly, there hasn't been anything going on worth talking about. My parents did try to reach out to me several times, but unfortunately, they did not apologize to me. They would only send me emails telling me that I was making a huge mistake by refusing to help my brother out, and that they were ashamed to call me their son, as if that was going to help Mickey out. In their emails, they were constantly just putting me down, and after a while it got old, so I stopped reading them. It's not that I hadn't tried to block them. I definitely would do that, but they would create new accounts after a while just to get on my nerves. Anyway, I didn't particularly care about that, so it was easy for me to ignore, and eventually I got busy with my work again, so I was not really bothered with any of this. The only way that I was hearing about my parents and Mickey's custody case was through a cousin whose mom is close to my parents. I haven't been in touch with most of my family, but my cousin and I have always gotten along well, so she has been keeping me updated. Last week, I found out that Mickey won't be having to pay child support because after a lot of back and forth, Jacob has decided to step up and be a father to his child. At first, he wasn't ready to commit, but Na made it very clear that if he did not step up and start being a dad, then she would leave him. And of course, he had been in touch with her all along, and he had also met his biological son several times, just as my brother had suspected. So, he did have a relationship with his son, he just didn't want to commit to anything. But I guess the idea of losing Na scared him, so he finally agreed to her terms, and from what I'm guessing, they are going to get married as soon as Na's divorce is finalized. They are trying to hurry up, so they've started agreeing to all of Mickey's terms. But I can already tell that this is not going to end well for Na because which relationship in the world has worked out well after an ultimatum? Anyway, that's going to be her karma, and I couldn't care less about it. I'm happy though that Mickey is getting out of this mess. I hope that someday at least the two of us are able to reconcile, but I don't think that as long as my parents are around, they are going to let it happen. Anyway, it doesn't matter to me much. I'm happy with my life, and these things don't affect me anymore. Now on to the next story. Story 2. My husband made me quit my job to be a stay-at-home mom, but after his mom passed away, he stopped working to play games and secretly sold our house because he wanted to live in a van. 6 months ago, my husband, Mike, destroyed our lives. You see, Mike and I were married for 3 years, and in all that time, I never saw any sign of trouble in our marriage. From the beginning, he was someone I thought I could depend on entirely. A solid, trustworthy partner who always seemed committed to our family. He used to be a devoted father to our 2 kids. He worked hard to provide for us and took pride in being there for our family. However, the turning point came when his mother passed away suddenly. Her death hit him harder than anything I'd seen before, and he became a different person in ways I struggled to understand. While I sympathized deeply with his grief, as I too had lost my parents at a young age, his reaction seemed very off for some reason. At first, it seemed almost minor. Mike would skip a day of work here and there. He'd tell me he was too tired to get up and go since his mother's death, and I thought maybe he just needed a break to recharge. But it soon turned into something much bigger. Instead of resting or looking for ways to work through his grief, he began spending entire days in the basement, glued to video games. Hours would pass, and it was like he'd forgotten about everything outside that screen. His responsibilities, his family, even himself. Even then, I tried to be understanding, believing that he might be using gaming as a way to escape from the pain of his mother's passing. But as the days turned into weeks, with him always skipping work, I began to worry. You see, we depended on him financially. If I had my own job, Perhaps I could have given him space to process things his way, but he was the one who had insisted on me being a stay-at-home mom. Early in our marriage, when we were preparing for our first child, Mike had strongly encouraged me to leave my job, saying he wanted our children to have a mother at home who could nurture and care for them full-time. So I agreed with him. It was a choice I made out of love for him and our future family. At the time, Mike had a stable, well-paying job, and we worked hard to save a lot of money. But now, with him skipping work while we had 2 children to look after, the whole situation began to feel like a ticking time bomb. Every day he missed work increased my anxiety, leaving me terrified that eventually he'd be terminated, and we'd have no way to support ourselves. On top of this, Mike also withdrew from helping with anything around the house. He barely interacted with the kids anymore and often ignored their requests for attention or playtime, leaving me to manage them alone. Simple tasks like loading the dishwasher or doing a few dishes suddenly became unbearable for him, and he refused to lift a finger. Personal care, too, fell by the wayside. Days would go by without him even taking a proper bath, and he would sometimes carry a stale smell, seeming oblivious to it. But the worst part was if I ever tried to talk to him about it, he would get agitated and angry. He would sometimes yell at me in front of our kids, something which he had never done before, leaving them confused and afraid. Eventually, the inevitable happened. His boss fired him. After weeks of absences and no formal communication, his company couldn't wait any longer. When Mike received the news, he exploded in anger, pacing around the house in a rage, throwing things, shouting at me and the kids if we dared to come near him. I tried to stay calm, cautiously telling him that we'd seen this coming after he'd been gone so long without notifying his boss. But this only seemed to trigger him. His face twisted with anger, and he started yelling about how nobody understood him or what he was going through. He started mumbling about how he had given years of his life to the company and his boss had no right to just fire him. He furiously said that he was so pissed at his boss that he could even shoot him. I looked at him, shocked, and realized from the intensity in his face that he wasn't joking or exaggerating. He looked like he genuinely meant it. Now, Mike was never a violent person, and before his mother's passing, if anyone would have told me that he would be talking like this, I would have never believed them. However, clearly he had changed and seemed like an entirely different person. Hearing him say that he wanted to shoot his boss made my stomach twist in fear. At this point, I began to realize my husband's struggles might go deeper than grief or anger. He might be dealing with depression, something beyond what I could help him with alone. I decided to gently suggest he consider seeing a therapist. When I first brought it up, he was defensive, outright refusing to talk to a stranger about his problems. He brushed off the idea, claiming he didn't need help and that he'd figure things out on his own. But as his mood swings grew more severe and unpredictable, leading to frequent arguments and tension between us, he finally gave in and agreed to give therapy a try. I felt a spark of hope, thinking that maybe with professional guidance he could find his way back to himself and to us. At first, I thought therapy might actually be making a difference, but soon it became clear that something wasn't right. Instead of focusing on healing or working through his issues, Mike began to develop some strange and impulsive behaviors. Out of nowhere, he started spending lavishly on luxury items we couldn't afford. Expensive perfumes, designer sneakers, things he'd never even cared about before. I reminded him that he was out of a job and we only had limited savings, so he should not be spending whatever money we had left on buying unnecessary things. However, Mike just ignored me and started saying how he finally had clarity and he knew what he was doing. With each passing day, I watched our savings dwindle. It was painful and terrifying to think that if this continued, we could lose everything. The possibility of my children and me being left without a safety net or a stable home weighed on me constantly. I realized then that I couldn't rely on Mike to turn things around, at least not soon enough to make a difference. I needed to step up and find a job, any job that could help us stay afloat. After days of searching and juggling interviews, I finally secured a part-time job at a fast food restaurant. It wasn't what I'd ever pictured myself doing, but it was a small step toward stability, and I clung to that. But now my life had become an exhausting routine. Not only was I working part-time, but I was also handling every single responsibility around the house. From laundry and cleaning to grocery shopping and paying bills, everything fell on me. My children needed care, guidance, and comfort, especially now as they were beginning to sense the tension and changes in their father. I was stretched thin, balancing work and home life on my own, while Mike drifted further away from us. His days were spent in the basement, which he turned into a makeshift man cave. He was either there or out for therapy appointments, rarely interacting with the kids or me. He'd even barred us from going into the basement, making it clear that this space was off-limits to any of us. Then, about 6 months ago, as I was preparing dinner in the kitchen and helping the kids with their school assignments, Mike came up from the basement, practically buzzing with excitement. He looked like he was really happy, and there was something I hadn't seen in him for a long time. At first, I felt a glimmer of hope, wondering if he might have finally secured a job to make things better for our family. I asked him what was going on, and he started excitedly telling me that he'd been talking with his therapist for days. They had been discussing what his dream future looks like, and apparently today he had finally taken the first step toward making that future happen. Confused, I asked him what he meant. Up until now, he had never mentioned any kind of dream future or life goals that he was working toward. Then Mike started telling me how ever since his mother passed, he'd felt too tied down by everything here. Our life, our family, this home. He explained that for a long time he'd been wanting to leave everything behind, to escape and start over somewhere far away. However, he couldn't just do that since he was married and had 2 kids, and this is why he had been depressed for months. I was taken aback, realizing the implications of what my husband just said. This was my husband, the father of our children, blaming us for his unhappiness. I looked over at our children who were still lingering nearby and gently asked them to go to their rooms so Mike and I could talk alone. I needed to understand exactly what Mike was talking about, so I asked him directly, "Why would you say something like this? What do you mean you want to leave everything behind?" Mike looked at me with a strange detachment, explaining that ever since his mother had passed, this entire city felt lifeless to him, as though nothing here held meaning anymore. The sense of emptiness, he said, had weighed on him so heavily that he could no longer stand the thought of staying. However, after talking to his therapist and realizing how short life can be, he was now going to work hard to make the most of whatever days he had left. Then came the real shock. Mike went on to tell me that after some serious thinking for months, he had finally sold our home, which is why he looked so excited to talk to me. He continued to say that now he could finally move on to a new phase in his life where he would just be traveling across the country with no worries in the world. I froze, barely able to comprehend his words as Mike continued to say how he just wanted to live the van life from now on. "What do you mean you sold our house?" I asked, hoping I had misheard. But he started telling me how I should not worry because if I wanted, me and the kids could join him in living this dream life. Mike explained to me that he'd rather do it on his own, but if I insisted, he'd let us join him while traveling. According to him, he had sold our house at a very good price, and with this money he wanted to buy a van, convert it into a tiny house and set out to live on the road, embracing a nomadic van life. I stared at him, searching his face for any sign that he might be joking or maybe he had just lost his mind finally. But he looked serious, deadly serious. "You sold our house without even talking to me about it? Are you out of your mind, Mike? This is our home, our life. How could you make such a huge decision without including me? Do you even care what I want? Or is this just all about you and your so-called dream?" I could feel my face flush as I kept going. "We have responsibilities, Mike. Bills, stability, a future to think about. Not to mention, how do you expect us to live in a van? What about my job? What about everything we've built together? You just decided all of this on your own and expected me to be okay with it." My voice cracked as the frustration, disbelief, and hurt spilled out all at once. "This is my house," he said flatly, "so I don't really need your permission to decide on what I want to do with it." With an almost rehearsed enthusiasm, he continued to convince me that this was the best decision for all of us. He pointed out how unhappy and sad he had been for months and had ignored me and the kids, but now for him to be happy again, he needed to do this. Hearing his words, a surge of anger flared up inside me. Anger I had been trying so hard to suppress over the past months. Did he honestly believe I would just go along with his ridiculous plan? He sold our home, the place where we raised our kids, shared memories, and built our lives, without a single word to me beforehand. As the reality of his choice sank in, so did the practical fears. "Where are we supposed to go now?" "That's completely up to you," Mike said. "If you want to come with me, we can use the money I have to buy the van and start traveling. If not, well, maybe you can stay with one of your friends for now. But you'll need to figure out a place for you and the kids soon." I pointed out to him how the kids needed to go to school every day, and they couldn't do that if we lived in a van and roamed around. However, Mike argued that education didn't have to be learned from books or classrooms, and that our kids could be taught from anywhere since nature is our greatest teacher. I scoffed at his response. He even suggested that we could make it work financially by taking up remote jobs while living on the road, jobs that would supposedly allow us to live freely and sustain our van life. My head started to pound as he went on and on. This sounded like a nightmare, like something from a story, not our real lives. Mike's words, his enthusiasm, and his complete detachment from reality made it feel as though I were talking to a stranger. Here he was expecting me to uproot everything, jeopardize our children's future, and dive into a life that he dreamed up on his own without a single thought of how it would impact us. I couldn't believe that because of this impulsive, life-altering decision, our once stable world had come crashing down around us. Mike continued to press, insisting that, as his partner, I should support him in this new vision. He spoke with such enthusiasm, even mentioning that he couldn't wait to share this good news with our children if I agreed with his plan. His words stopped me in my tracks. For months, I had supported him through everything. From the depths of his grief to his self-imposed isolation, his anger, his rash decisions, and even the financial fallout of his unemployment. I had stood by him, hoping that if I kept things stable, he would eventually come back to himself. But clearly, he did not deserve me anymore. I looked at him and for the first time, let the truth come out. "You're right, Mike. I am your wife, and I have supported you every single day since your mother's death. I've been there for you without fail. I took on everything from taking care of the kids and keeping up the house to picking up a job to bring in money after you lost yours. I hoped that by holding it all together, you would come back to us. But now you've gone ahead and sold our house, the only security we have, and you expect us to abandon everything to raise our children in a van with no stability and no plan? No, Mike, I won't do that, and I certainly won't let our children's lives be uprooted because of this." Mike looked at me with a mixture of confusion and frustration, asking why I was blaming him for his decision when all he wanted was to feel some happiness. Taking a steadying breath, I made it clear that he needed to find a way to undo the sale. I told him he should either return the money to the buyer and let us keep our home, or at the very least buy a new place where we could settle down. Mike refused to do this, arguing that he couldn't just abandon his dream of living on the road because of me. He insisted that I was standing in the way of his happiness, as if his dream somehow justified throwing his family into the streets. I told him flatly that if living in a van was what he truly wanted, then he was welcome to pursue that, but I would not uproot myself and our children to live out his fantasy. The kids and I needed stability, and if that meant he would go on without us, then so be it. Mike stayed quiet, and I hoped he was taking time to think it over and would eventually choose to stay with us. But I couldn't have been more wrong. Without a second thought, Mike left us behind. Within a week, he had packed up his things and left us to live out his so-called van life dream. I just couldn't believe it. Me and the kids had nowhere to go. With no real support from Mike, I had no choice but to turn to my older sister, Lizzie, who graciously offered us a place to stay. Lizzie had always hated Mike, so when she found out that he had abandoned us to go live his dream life, she was even more furious. She pushed me to file for divorce immediately. At that moment, though, I wasn't sure I was ready for that. I didn't have the financial means to proceed with a divorce, and everything was still so overwhelming. Honestly, I never imagined I'd find myself in this situation, facing the possibility of separation after everything me and Mike had been through together. I needed time to process everything, to catch my breath, and to figure out how I was going to rebuild our lives without him. Lizzie was the one who helped me find a new and better job as an assistant at her friend's boutique. This job was such an upgrade compared to my part-time fast food job. Even though I was happy to be earning well and being able to support my children, I still was heartbroken over losing my husband. My children were also confused. Mike didn't even have the decency to talk to them before leaving. As a result, the children were so confused about why their father wasn't coming home or why we were not living at our home anymore. And it broke my heart every time I couldn't give them a straight answer. I tried calling Mike, hoping he'd at least take a moment to talk to the kids, to explain himself, but he refused to pick up. After a few weeks, he even disconnected his number altogether, which meant I couldn't even contact him. It was like he had completely erased himself from our lives, leaving me to carry the weight of his decisions while the children were left with nothing but their unanswered questions. The past 6 months have been incredibly hard, but I've slowly managed to rebuild my life. The children have finally begun to settle down, and they've started to adjust to life without Mike. It's been a huge relief to see them happier, more at peace, and no longer burdened by the tension Mike's absence caused. As for me, I've come to terms with the reality that my life is no longer with him. I've accepted that our relationship is over, and I've spoken to a lawyer, preparing to file for divorce. The only problem is I don't know where Mike is. He disappeared without a trace, and none of his friends or family seem to have any idea where he is. Now, I considered hiring a private investigator to track him down, but I didn't want to waste any more money on him, especially after everything that had happened. Then, out of nowhere, Mike reached out to me yesterday. At first, I didn't even recognize the number, an unknown one, but when he identified himself, I was taken aback. After so long, I was shocked that he was trying to contact me. He awkwardly asked how me and the children were doing, and I sarcastically told him we were doing just fine without him. He was asking me more about our lives, but I seized the opportunity to be clear with him. I told him that it was actually good that he had called because I wanted to serve him divorce papers. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. He finally spoke, his voice sounding somewhat shaken. He said he didn't expect me to just bring up divorce out of nowhere. I couldn't help but laugh at that, considering this wasn't coming out of nowhere at all. This was the reality of what had been happening for months. He had abandoned us, leaving us without a house or any money, and yet he still expected us to stay married? That's when Mike started to tell me how he didn't want us to get a divorce. He pleaded that even though he had made a selfish decision by leaving, he was now fully healed and as good as new. Also, after all the time he spent on the road, he had come to realize that it wasn't as great as he had imagined. He missed us, he missed being a part of the family, and he wanted to come back to us. He begged me to give him a second chance. No, I refused outright. After all that had happened, after everything he had put us through, he thought he could just waltz back in and everything would be okay? I told him that I did not want him. In fact, me and the children didn't even need him anymore. We had moved on. We were doing just fine without him, and we were better off that way. Hearing this, Mike tried to argue with me, insisting that I was being too harsh and that he had changed on the road, that things could now go back to how they were. But I stood my ground. In the end, I told him he could take a few days to process everything, but I was going ahead with a divorce no matter what he felt. Update 1. Thank you everyone for your suggestions. To clarify a few points, Mike never reached out to us even once during his 6-month hiatus on the road. He never gave me any money or paid child support. Besides his mother, Mike was never really close to any of his family, so no one had any idea where he went during these past couple of months. For anyone out there speculating that maybe he was cheating or that he had some side chick, which is why he abandoned us in the first place, and now that things didn't work out with her, he's coming back to us. Honestly, I don't care anymore. I'm not interested in digging into what he was doing or where he was. At this point, it doesn't even matter. The past is behind us, and whatever happened, happened. What I need now is clarity, peace, and stability for myself and the kids. At this point, all I want is a divorce from Mike, that's all. Update 2. So, I finally met up with Mike and served him with divorce papers. At first, he thought that simply meeting with me would somehow prove to me that he had changed, that I would see the person he had become. He started by telling me that he now had a steady job and had been diligently saving money. He said that during his road trip, no matter where he went or what new place he tried to settle into, he only found himself missing me and the children. He pleaded with me, asking for another chance, promising that this time he would do things differently. He even said he would buy a house for us again. I reminded him that he had sold our last house without my consent, a decision that had left me feeling betrayed and unimportant. He quickly promised that this time he would make sure I was included on the house deed so that I would feel secure and protected this time around. I just shook my head at his empty words and handed him the divorce papers. I knew better than to believe him this time. The look on his face when he realized what was actually happening, when he saw that he wasn't being handed a second chance but instead a lawsuit for child support and divorce papers, was absolutely priceless. He seemed completely taken aback, almost like he couldn't believe it. He asked me in utter disbelief why I was doing this to him, especially since all he wanted was to reunite us as a family. I made it clear to him that if he truly wanted to be there for the kids, that was fine, but I didn't want anything more than that. I told him straight up that he was not my partner anymore, and I wasn't about to let him disrupt my life again. I've been through enough. He tried to argue some more, like he always does, but I wasn't having it. I just turned around and walked away. At that point, he wasn't even worth fighting with anymore. I've heard all the empty promises and seen the same pattern too many times to keep wasting my energy. I was done with the drama. Since then, Mike has been bombarding me with multiple voicemails, practically begging me to meet up with him again, asking for another chance. The way he's acting feels almost desperate, and I can't help but feel irritated. He keeps texting me about how he lost his mother and now he's going to lose me and the kids too. The thing is, this man was the one who walked out on us in the first place, leaving us all behind without a second thought. And now here he is, acting like he's the victim, trying to manipulate me into feeling responsible for his misery. It's like he thinks a few pleases will somehow erase the past. But that's not how it works. Update 3. It's been 7 months since my last update, and I apologize for the delay in updating anything here. Life has been a whirlwind, but I just wanted to share where things stand now. After a lengthy divorce process, I finally got my divorce from Mike. The court ordered him to pay child support every month, just as I had wanted. Honestly, it was such a relief knowing I wouldn't have to shoulder all of the children's responsibilities on my own anymore. On top of this, he was also ordered to pay all the overdue child support payments along with a hefty alimony as a consequence of abandoning his family all those months ago. As of now, Mike and I will share custody of the children, and I'm sort of okay with that. I want our kids to grow up with both of their parents in their lives, even though we're divorced. They deserve that stability, and honestly, I think it will be good for them. However, if Mike abandons them ever again, I will make sure he loses them forever. Recently, I moved me and the kids into a small apartment of my own. Lizzie would have let us stay with her longer, but I felt guilty being there for so long, even though I was incredibly grateful for everything she had done for us. It was time to start our own new chapter and build a life for ourselves. These last few months haven't been easy, but I'm starting to feel like things are finally falling into place. Honestly, I'm proud of how far I've come and how far my children have come too. I really believe we're going to be just fine. Now on to the next story. Story 3. Let my sister-in-law live with us for college, but then she demanded a car. When I refused, my in-laws traveled 1,200 miles to lecture me for not being a good wife because I refused to fund my spoiled sister-in-law's car. My in-laws live quite far away, and we don't really get to see them often. My husband, 26M, and I, 25F, have chosen to live away from his family on purpose because they can be a little overbearing at times. We have been together for 6 years and married for 3, and we only moved away 2 years ago. To be honest, his family was not the only reason for us moving, since I got a pretty good job and the kind of money that I would make from the job justified having to move away from our city. My family was fine with it, and they were even happy about us moving away because it meant that I would be working in a better place. But his family was the one who had a problem with it. They tried to talk us out of it and claimed that it would be very difficult for us to live completely by ourselves in a strange new place, but our minds had been made up. His family was also quite unhappy about the fact that my husband was going to have to give up time with his family for my sake since I was the one who wanted to change jobs, as if it was a crime to want to move ahead in my career. And just for the record, my husband did not mind moving someplace else and leaving his family behind for my sake because when the money came in, it would belong to both of us. Also, he mostly works from home, so it doesn't really matter to him where he lives anyway. Even though his family had always liked me in the beginning, for the past 2 years, things had been pretty strained between us. My husband and I still tried to keep in touch, though, and we do visit home at least once a month, but that's about it. We were fine with this, but then around 6 months ago, my sister-in-law told me that she wanted to move in with us for a couple of months because she was planning on going to college nearby. The college she got accepted into is literally just a 30-minute drive away from our house, and I didn't know if this was something she had planned or if it just organically happened, but she asked my husband if we would be willing to let her live with us for free because she didn't want to live on campus and her parents were not ready to pay for an apartment. Apparently, the reason she did not want campus accommodation was because the rules were a little too strict, and she wanted to have a certain degree of freedom which she believed she would get if she stayed with us, and my husband's family was also fine with her staying with us, so we decided to agree after some discussion. It was mostly because from what I've known in the past, my sister-in-law is a good kid, but I hadn't expected her to change so quickly. Over the past couple of years, when my husband and I moved away, she was just 16, and even then, she was pretty sweet. After we moved away, we only met a handful of times and hadn't exactly spent a lot of time together, so we didn't realize that she had turned into a totally spoiled brat. My husband is not really that close with his sister, mostly because of the huge age gap, so he had no idea that she had changed so much. Of course, she was being very nice to us when she wanted us to agree to let her stay rent-free while she was in college, but after she moved in with us, she started showing us her true colors. In the past 6 months, we have realized that she is not really the sweet little girl that we used to know in the past. She has been spoiled rotten and has a terrible attitude problem. We had agreed to let her live with us on one condition: that she would try to look for a job so she would be able to pay for accommodation herself and move out so she could get in an apartment. She had agreed that in a couple of months she would start looking for jobs around here that she would work at alongside college. Then, once she had saved enough money, she and a couple of her friends would find an apartment, and she would be out of my hair. Even her parents had been fine with this arrangement, so I thought that she would be looking for jobs, but every time that I would ask her if she had made any progress on that, she would get annoyed with me and roll her eyes, and it was just very weird because it's not like she was doing a favor to me. She also had no respect for our time and energy because she would come back home late frequently without even bothering to tell us where she was the entire evening. And every time that this would happen, she would come back drunk in the middle of the night, and my husband and I would have to let her in after having stayed up worried sick since we didn't even know where she was. We told her not to do that several times and even threatened to complain to her parents about her behavior, but she would apologize to us profusely, be on her best behavior for a couple of weeks, and then end up doing the same thing again. And to top it all off, she was also a huge slob who left her things all around the house, and we were the ones who ended up having to clean up after her. So, needless to say, she had been getting on our very last nerve for the past 6 months, and we were just waiting for her to move out so we could go back to our old life. My husband loves his family and has always adored his little sister, but honestly, there is a limit to what one can tolerate, and she and my husband's family crossed that limit recently, which is why we decided to kick her out. So far, we had only been putting up with her because she's a lot younger than us, and we didn't have it in us to be harsh with her. But a couple of days ago, she approached the two of us on the weekend and said that she had been finding it very difficult to commute to college every morning because she was used to sleeping in late, but if she wanted to take the bus, then she would have to wake up super early or else she would end up missing her first class. I thought that she was going to tell us that she had finally decided to live on campus so she would get some extra time in the morning, but instead, she told us that she had been thinking that maybe it was about time that she had a car of her own here so she could just drive to college. She had already taken driving lessons in high school and had a driver's license, but when she used to live with her parents, she used to drive her dad's car. However, now since she turned 18 just a couple of months ago, she believes that it is time for her to have a car of her own here since that would be pretty convenient. It was very confusing because we had no idea why she was saying that to us and not to her parents, and my husband even offered to speak to his father about it, but she told us that she had already spoken to him, and apparently my in-laws had told her that she needed to talk to us about it because we were responsible for her since my father-in-law had retired recently. So now, if she wanted a car, we were going to have to fund it for her, and that's why she had come to us after speaking to her parents. At that point, I didn't even know who I was mad at, my sister-in-law or my husband's parents. I tried to explain to my sister as politely as I could what her parents had suggested was just not realistic because even though we were making good money right now, We planned on starting a family pretty soon, and we were going to have to start saving for our own future as well, so there was no way that we were ready to take up her responsibility, especially not financially. I thought that she was going to be reasonable about it, but I was obviously wrong because as soon as I started talking to her, she understood that we were going to decline, and instead of just accepting it gracefully, she started stomping her foot and said that she didn't care how we arranged it, but she wanted a car, and now my in-laws and I could talk it out amongst ourselves, but she just wanted a car by the end of this month. And then she locked herself in her room and refused to come out until dinner time. To be honest, it was only her brother who tried to talk to her for a couple of minutes, but after that, he gave up too because he was also quite frustrated. We were already allowing her to live with us without paying rent even though she blatantly disregarded our way of living. And now on top of that, she expected us to bow to all her whims and fancies. We were also pretty mad at his parents since they had no right to tell her that we were responsible for her just because my father-in-law had retired. So, after my sister-in-law told us what her father had said, we called him up, or at least we tried to contact him, but we did not receive any response. It also came as a huge shock to us that my father-in-law had apparently retired, not because we didn't know anything about it and nobody had even told us, but also because he was not even close to the age of retirement. He was just around 53, and it wasn't even like he was seriously ill and couldn't continue working. Besides, he and my mother-in-law had both quit their corporate jobs about 7 years ago and had been running a moderately successful accounting firm since then. So, it wasn't even as though they had very high-pressure jobs and were still not making enough money for themselves. They were definitely rich enough to cover all the expenses for my sister-in-law but just didn't want to. But that day they did not respond to us, and neither did we hear back from them for the next 2 days. My sister-in-law also did not speak to me or her brother for those 2 days. Then on the third day, my in-laws finally showed up at our house really late in the evening, around the time that we were supposed to have dinner. It was a huge shock because ever since we had moved here, my in-laws had only come here once on the day of our housewarming party. After that, they had never bothered to show up and always had an excuse ready. Like it was just too far for them to travel at their age, or that they didn't want to bother us even though we had never said that it would be any trouble for us. The real reason that they never visited us here was because they wanted me to know that they did not approve of the fact that I had decided that my husband and I were going to live away from them, and they didn't need to tell me about it, I just knew. I guess they just didn't understand that it was not a decision that was solely mine. Even their own son wanted some space away from them, but whatever, that's not the point. The point was that they had never come to visit us in the past 2 years, but just because we had refused to fund my sister-in-law's demand for a car, they had driven all 1,200 miles just to speak to us about it. Apparently, as soon as we had declined to fund the car, my sister-in-law had immediately called her parents up and told them all about it. And that's why they had not been responding to our phone calls and messages. They had kept in touch with my sister-in-law for the past 2 days, and since she had told them that my husband and I had apparently refused to speak to her or even acknowledge her existence in the house after we had that fight, they had decided to come all the way here to sort things out. The day before they visited, they had decided that they couldn't let this go on anymore, and they needed to talk to me. I was a bit surprised that they said that they needed to talk to me because I couldn't imagine that I had done anything wrong. But I still heard them out, and after they were done talking, I realized that they had basically traveled all the way here just to lecture me on how to be a good wife because throughout the speech they kept insisting that my husband had made a lot of sacrifices for my sake and the least that I could do for my in-laws was at least be supportive of my sister-in-law. Now, he said that he and my mother-in-law had chosen to say that they had retired and now my husband and I would have to support my sister-in-law because they had their own old age to think about. He hadn't actually retired. They just wanted to see how I would react, and I had disappointed them by declining to help my sister-in-law out. They claimed that I was being selfish because I had already moved away from them and kept their son away for 2 years, and now when I had the chance to make it up to them by financially supporting my sister-in-law, I was refusing to do even that. They started lecturing me about how after marriage, my husband's family is also my own, and I should start treating them like my own family and respecting them the same way that I respect my own parents. While they were speaking, I was actually in disbelief because I couldn't imagine anyone being so tone-deaf. It was the fact that they were calling me selfish for not wanting to fund my sister-in-law's decision to buy a car, especially since she didn't even need one right now, even though they were the ones who were refusing to cover any of the expenses for their own daughter, and my husband and I had been the ones to allow her to live with us without any rent. It was the hypocrisy of the situation that really ticked me off, And there was also the fact that they thought telling us that they had retired and were not going to be able to pay for any of my sister-in-law's expenses anymore, and she was our responsibility now just to test us. That was simply awful. So, after they were done lecturing me, I could have yelled at them, but I just chose to deal with it as calmly as I could, and I told them that they were right about me being a selfish person. So now, since I was so selfish, I had made up my mind that my sister-in-law was no longer going to live with me since neither she nor her parents had been paying rent for the past 6 months, and I was done letting people take advantage of me and my husband, and for free on top of that. I knew that my sister-in-law had believed that she had won me up by contacting her parents and bringing them here to speak to me in person. She had probably believed that I would just fold, but I had had enough of my husband's family, and even my husband couldn't tolerate their behavior anymore, so he decided to stand by me. So when I said that she was no longer welcome to live with us anymore, they started arguing with me, but there was simply no point, and even when they turned to my husband for help, he said that he agreed with me, and that made the argument even worse. After a certain point, all of us were just getting at each other, and it was getting incoherent, so I told them that they could either all leave voluntarily or I would gladly call the cops to make them leave. My in-laws cussed me out, but eventually they left along with my sister-in-law who was sobbing like a baby. That happened 2 days ago, and since then we had no contact with his family. My husband and I had a discussion about it, but both of us were actually fine with not having any contact with them. However, all of them showed up again this morning, but it was only to collect all the things that my sister-in-law had left behind. The energy was very different this time. It was very obvious that they were not here to reason with us, but they were done with us as well. It was all very quiet and cold between us, and once they were finally done packing, they were about to leave, but my mother-in-law chose to turn around and tell me that even though we were fine with what we were doing right now, we would look back on it in a couple of years and would regret letting our family go so easily over something so petty. And addressing me, she told me that if my husband was in agreement with me right now, he would definitely end up resenting me in the future because he has always loved his family, even though he hasn't always gotten along with them. But now I'm the reason that he has had to choose between his family and his wife, and no matter how we are dealing with it right now, he will definitely resent me for it, and I will have nobody to blame but myself because I've always been the kind of person to put myself above everyone else. Personally, I thought it was a very dramatic and unnecessary thing to do, but anyway, after that she left with my father-in-law and sister-in-law. I was kind of weirded out by what she said, so I decided to address it with my husband and speak to him about it. I wanted to make sure that he was fine with our decision because honestly everything that we have done so far has been our decision and not just mine, and he reassured me that he was fine with whatever was going on because it was his family who were overstepping boundaries, and we had every right to cut them out of our lives if we thought that they were getting too toxic. Most importantly, we had tried our best to be good to his sister, but she had just grown up to be extremely spoiled and entitled, and he blamed his parents for that, and even in this situation it was his family who was to be blamed and not me for reacting the way that I did. So he told me exactly what I needed to hear to feel better, but for some reason, I still don't feel too sure that my mother-in-law was wrong. I don't know why exactly I've been feeling this way, but ever since she said all those things, it has been playing in my head non-stop, and I can't seem to get it out of my mind. I've spoken to my husband, my parents, and even my friends about it, and everyone thinks that we did what was right for us and we don't need to feel guilty about it, but I still kind of feel bad and guilty now since in a way I did tear him away from his family. Maybe not directly, but all the issues that have been created have indirectly been because of me, and I don't know, I just feel weird about it. I've never really sat and thought about it the way I have as of late, and I'm just afraid that my mother-in-law might be right. So even though I've asked a lot of people about it, I felt that asking random people who don't know me but only know the situation might be better for my own peace of mind. So, am I the asshole for kicking my sister-in-law out of our house because she had complained to her parents about me and my husband not buying her a car? Update 1. Hey, so I'll start by explaining exactly why my mother-in-law's words really got to me. Recently, I've been feeling a bit iffy about the fact that, because of me, my husband really never gets to see or speak to his family anymore. My mother recently celebrated her birthday a couple of weeks back, and I couldn't be there for her because I had to work, and I couldn't just travel to go see her because I couldn't afford to miss even a single day that week. And I had been missing my parents a lot since I missed my mom's birthday because I've hardly ever missed any birthdays in the past couple of years apart from this one. My husband was there for me, and both he and my mother reassured me that it was fine, it wasn't a big deal, but to me it felt like it was. And while I was thinking about that, it just hit me that because of me, my husband's family hardly ever bothers to keep in touch with him anymore, and even his sister has become so spoiled that she doesn't seem to care about his feelings much either. His parents were right that he doesn't particularly get along with them and they disagree on a lot of things, but I always knew that he was very attached to his family in spite of everything. So that's why I had been feeling guilty, because I felt like I was the one standing between his family and him. And after making that post, I decided to speak to him about it once again because I had to get it all off my chest. And thankfully he reassured me that no matter what was going on with his family, he did not think that it had anything to do with me and had everything to do with their massive overinflated egos. If they couldn't keep that aside, he was not going to talk to them either, and for him, his priorities were always going to be clear. Ever since he got married, his priority has always been me, and he knows that he is my priority as well, which is true. So as long as we are clear about that, he is never going to resent me because nothing that has happened so far has been my own decision solely, but he has also been an active part of it. After speaking to him about it openly, I felt much better about everything, and of course, most of the people in the comments section also agreed that I did not have to blame myself and that my mother-in-law had just been trying to get inside my head, and she had succeeded. But my relationship with my husband is a lot stronger than she thinks and is going to take a lot more than just a couple of words to break us apart. Anyway, it has been a couple of days since we last saw them, and we haven't had any contact with them since then. It's fine though, I don't really care anymore, and I don't think my husband does either. Update 2. So 2 weeks ago, my sister-in-law left, and we stopped speaking to my in-laws altogether. Since then, we haven't had any contact with them, but recently, about 3 days ago, I heard from my parents that my in-laws had returned, and the first thing that they did after coming back was contact my parents to tell them they were really disappointed in how I was behaving because it's not like I've only known them for a couple of years. We have known each other in our families for the past 6 years, and that's a really long time. My in-laws told my parents that apparently they had always believed that I would treat them with the same kind of respect and love with which I treated my own parents, but they had obviously been mistaken since I did not seem to care about them at all, and they were really disappointed because they had always considered me as their own daughter and had always treated me like that too. That's honestly not true because even though they had been very kind to me in the beginning, ever since my husband and I moved away, they had been really passive-aggressive every time that we visited, and of course there was also the fact that they never made an effort to come to see us. My parents had visited us several times over the past 2 years, and it felt like they were willing to make an effort to keep in touch with us, but my in-laws didn't seem interested. Initially, my husband and I tried our best to be there for them by visiting every month, but every time that we would visit, they would just act very weird to me, and it was obvious that they were still not ready to accept the fact that we had moved away from them. Even then, we still kept trying because we felt guilty, but after one point we got busy with our lives, and then they started guilt-tripping us about how we did not try hard enough to keep in touch with them. So honestly, there was never any winning with them, and I'm glad that they're not in my life anymore. Even my parents did not take any of my in-laws' BS and told them that if my husband and I had decided not to keep in touch with them, we must have had our reasons, and they were going to be respectful of that and maintain the distance as well. I guess my in-laws had expected that speaking to my parents would be helpful to them because they had believed that my parents would speak to me and then eventually we would end up apologizing to them, but I guess they didn't see this coming. Anyway, I'm glad that my parents are supportive of me, and I really wish that my in-laws could have also been supportive of my husband because I know that it would have meant the world to him. Right now, though, he's just embarrassed by how his family has been behaving, and I don't even blame him. Update 3. Hey, so it has been a couple of weeks since I last heard from my in-laws, and we are pretty much over it. I think it's been almost a month and a half, but I don't think they are over it yet, especially not my sister-in-law, since she sent me a message last night on Instagram. She told me that apparently after I kicked her out so heartlessly, her parents decided that they were going to get her everything that she wanted because clearly they had failed in raising one son, but they were not going to fail her. So currently, she is living in an apartment with her friends and also has the car that we had declined to buy her. Like I said, it's not like my in-laws could not afford to cover the expenses of my sister-in-law. They just did not want to because they wanted to test us or whatever. I don't think it was a test. I think they just didn't want to waste their own money by throwing it all away on my sister-in-law. They wanted us to do it because obviously in one way they wanted to punish us for moving away, and moreover, I guess they really liked the idea of putting us to a test. And then when we inevitably failed because we're not idiots, they would get the opportunity to make us feel small. Honestly, I'm glad that my husband and I failed by their standards because that just means that we are reasonable people and not pushovers. I made my husband read the message that my sister-in-law sent to me, and honestly it was just disappointing, so we decided that we were going to block all of them. So far we hadn't done that because it seemed petty and unnecessary, but right now I don't think that it matters anymore, so we have blocked them, and we are going to focus on our own life now. And I know for a fact that in a couple of months, his family is going to come crawling back to us apologizing for everything because my husband and I are planning on starting a family. We are going to start trying for a baby in a couple of weeks, and once the baby is born, I'm going to take some time off and move back so that I can be closer to my family. I've already spoken to my employers, and they think it's a good idea because they have been thinking about branching out, and I can help them with that. Nothing has been finalized as of now, but that's the plan. I can't wait for all of it to happen, though, because my husband and I have been thinking about this for the longest time, and we finally know that it's the right time to go ahead with it and start a family of our own. We are very happy with how things are right now, and we know that in a couple of months we are going to be even happier. Now on to the next story. Story 4. My golden child brother couldn't bear that I'm doing better in life. So he spray painted my car. He thought I wouldn't do anything, but I posted the video online, and now he's in trouble. I, 30F, have a younger brother, Jackson, 26M, and we do not get along. Never have, never will. I guess that's why he went out of his way to try and cause trouble for me, but this time, unfortunately, it backfired on him. Part of the credit for that would go to my parents, who always treated him differently. As a young kid, it was very confusing for me because as long as it was just me, my parents doted on me. But as soon as my brother was born, I was pushed to the sidelines, and there was nothing that I could do to bring them back to me. Believe me, I tried really hard to win them over but never had any luck. After Jackson was born, I took part in sports, stayed ahead academically, danced, sang, and acted in school plays, but nothing impressed my parents enough to pay attention to me. It was all about Jackson, which was weird because he didn't seem to be exceptionally talented at anything to me. Had he been a child prodigy, I might have even forgiven my parents for the kind of treatment I received, but he was a bratty and spoiled kid who got so used to the attention that he just couldn't stand it when anyone else was receiving it. Every time I came home with good news from school, he would find some way to make the day about him, and my parents let him get away with it as well. It was like they were blind when it came to him, and they proved me right on my 18th birthday. When I turned 18, my parents threw me a party, but in the middle of it, we received word from the cops that my brother had apparently decided to get caught while drinking with a couple of his friends. Here's the deal. All of his other friends had made a run for it, but he was the only one who had been caught, and I knew that it was on purpose. He wanted to get caught so they would become all about him and my parents would be concerned. The worst part is that he didn't even get into trouble for it. The cops just let him off with a warning because my dad is on the force. Once my parents had brought him back home, they just reprimanded him for a bit, but they didn't even punish him by grounding him or whatever, so he totally got away with ruining my party. And it wasn't even the last time that something like this happened. At 21, when I got my first job, he decided to come home with his girlfriend and told our parents that he was engaged to her. So, instead of celebrating my job, we started to celebrate his engagement, and once again, the spotlight was stolen from me. I think for me personally, that was the straw that broke the camel's back. I got into a huge fight with my brother and my parents that day, and instead of trying to understand me, they told me that I was being oversensitive and dramatic. After that, I never spoke to them again. My parents tried to reach out to me several times afterward, but it has been 9 years, and I still haven't spoken to them because I know that they still love my brother a lot more than they loved me. Jackson has never tried to reach out to me, and from what I know, he broke off the engagement with that girl a couple of weeks after I cut them out of my life. So all that really was just to hog the limelight so I didn't get any attention. Anyway, I'm glad that he did not try and reach out because he's a horrible human being, and I wouldn't want anything to do with him. For 9 years we haven't spoken, but I guess he knows what I've been up to. We have all seen each other at family events and stuff, and I think my family knows that I'm doing well for myself. I drive a pretty nice car, and I always try to dress my best. Since I don't have any family of my own, and I don't plan on having one anytime soon either, all my money is spent on myself. I can afford this because I'm running my own company, and it's pretty thrilling since that's what I always wanted to do. 2 years ago, when my business started taking off, I decided to buy a new house and moved out of the apartment that I had been living in ever since I got my first job. I had told all my relatives not to give out my address to my family, especially not to my brother, but somehow he was able to find out about it. 6 days ago, he showed up in the evening and decided to vandalize my car. I had just come back home from work, and I was about to leave for a party again, so I hadn't bothered to park my car in the garage, and it was still out in the driveway. When I came back outside to drive to the party, I saw that somebody had spray-painted my car with blood-red paint, and they had said some pretty mean stuff. The sides of the car had been spray-painted with a bunch of cuss words, but that did not bother me as much as what had been spray-painted on the windshield. "You don't deserve any of this." I was shocked for a few minutes, trying to just process what I was seeing, and I was about to call the cops when I realized that if this was the handiwork of my brother, then there was simply no point in doing so. Because if I got the cops to report my brother, my dad would just squash the entire case, and he would be let off with just a warning again. After I had processed what I had seen, I realized that the handwriting belonged to my brother, and just to be sure, I checked the security footage as well. He had been wearing a hoodie, but I could just tell that it was him since he hadn't been careful enough, and I had caught a bit of his face on the cameras. When I realized that it was him, I knew that there was no point in calling the cops because my dad would deal with it, and he would get away with everything. I'm speaking from experience, not just for my 18th birthday, but also because of all the gossip that I've heard about my brother from a couple of relatives. Apparently, taking advantage of my dad's connections has become a pretty common thing for him. To be honest, I have a fair idea of why Jackson did this since he hasn't been doing that well in life. I have heard from a couple of people that he had tried to start a business a few years back, but that had failed miserably, and he had to get help from our parents to clear all his debts. Even the jobs that he had had before refused to take him back. With nothing else to do, he kind of gave up on everything and just started drinking and doing drugs, and my dad knows about it. He knows about all my brother's shady dealings and is constantly trying to help him cover up and bail him out anytime he gets into trouble. I guess recently Jackson has been finding it very difficult to deal with the fact that I am successful, especially because I made it to the cover of a local magazine, and that had become the talk of the town among the family a few days back. He's not really dealing well with it emotionally since he hasn't really grown up from when we were kids, and also because he doesn't really have anything going on for himself, and partying every weekend isn't really something worth bragging about anymore. Maybe that's why he felt like he had to go out of his way to vandalize my car and let me know that I don't deserve any of this, even though I do. It might sound mean what I'm about to say, but he also deserves what he is going through right now. He was never very hardworking or dedicated to anything. He just expected things to work out for him, and my parents always made it happen. So it isn't surprising that he's turned out like this. When I saw that footage, I knew that there was no point in taking it to the cops because my dad would definitely not allow Jackson to get in any sort of trouble. But I was not about to let him get away with it since I had never even spoken to them for 9 years. But he had still decided to try and get on my nerves. After some brainstorming, I came up with a brilliant idea: posting the video on social media and leaving everyone else to deal with him. I took a bunch of photos of whatever was written on my car and posted it along with a video, claiming that it was my brother who had done it, and I was sure of it. Unfortunately, I couldn't go to the cops with this information because my dad, who had spent a lifetime on the force, was going to make sure that he covered all of this up just so his darling baby did not get into trouble. Within a couple of hours, the comments started pouring in, and I had made sure to unblock my family just so they would be able to see this post. When Jackson inevitably texted me to take that post down, I just told him that I wasn't going to do that, and he couldn't even make me because if he took this up legally, he would have to prove that it was actually not him in the video, and that would require the situation to go to court, and it definitely is him in the video. So we were at a stalemate, but to be honest, he had more to lose than I did because even though he had vandalized my car, and I would have to pay for it to get repainted, it really wasn't a big deal for me because I was earning enough to be able to afford it. On the other hand, if he decided to take this situation up legally in order to get me to take my post down, then he would have to try and prove that it was not him. If it was actually proven that it was definitely him in the video, he would be screwed. It wasn't just about him. Even my father and whoever had been helping him out, they would also get into trouble. I'm pretty sure that he hadn't seen this coming. He had probably just expected me to go to the cops and have them deal with it, and then he would have just spoken to our dad and gotten away with all of this scot-free. Unfortunately, I know my family, and he picked a fight with the wrong person this time. So after I sent the text to him, he did not even reply for a couple of days because he did not have anything to say. The post stayed up, and pretty much everyone that we know, my friends, our family members, and even our family friends, had seen that post. Finally, 2 days ago, he reached out to me once again and said that he was ready to cough up the money required for the paint job, but he just wanted me to take that post down. But for me, it was obviously not about the money, so I told him that I didn't care about the money. I wanted him to acknowledge what he had done and post a public apology, and only then would I consider taking the post down. At that point, he started pleading with me and said that he was ready to apologize in person or however else I wanted, but just not publicly because that would involve having to accept the fact that he had done something like this, and it would put everything at risk for him, and claimed that he would lose all his clients. I don't know what client he's talking about because I don't think he has a business right now, but I don't care either way. So far, he had just been denying all of it whenever anyone was approaching him to ask about it, but accepting it was just going to make him look bad. But I didn't really care. I told him that this was what I wanted, and he could either do it or that post would stay up. It was as simple as that for me. He sent me a couple more messages after I told him that I was not ready to negotiate, trying to reason with me, but I didn't even bother to reply. A few hours after that, my father called me up and told me that the post that I had made was not just reflecting badly on my brother but also on him, and he had dedicated his life to his career, so he couldn't allow something like this to derail it. He requested me to take that post down, and yet again I had to disappoint another person by declining because if he had just not risked it all to protect my brother, maybe I wouldn't have anything to say against him in my post in the first place. Now his reputation was at stake, but instead of trying to convince Jackson to apologize to me publicly, my parents started yelling at me on the phone. They said that I was being ridiculous and that my success had gone to my head since I thought that I could just do whatever I wanted and get away with it. I was about to hang up on them as soon as they started yelling at me, but then my mother started crying and said that she had never expected me to behave like this. She acknowledged the fact that Jackson and I had been treated differently as kids, but she and my father had tried to contact me several times throughout the past 9 years, and yet I had never responded. So it wasn't fair for me to act like they were the villains here, even though they had tried to make amends with me a lot of times. Even now, I had no idea that they had apparently cut ties with Jackson soon after I made that post, and he told them the truth that it was indeed him. The only reason they were even speaking with him right now was because they had to get me to take that post down, but apart from that, they had no contact. They told me that they really had changed as people, but now by not taking the post down, I was ruining my dad's reputation as well without even giving him a chance to prove that he had changed. Now I'm kind of confused because I really don't want to take that post down. At the same time, I don't understand what to do with the situation regarding my parents. So, am I the asshole for not wanting to take down a Facebook post against my brother, even though it's ruining my dad's reputation? Update 1. Hello. So, a couple of things before I move on to the update. The first being that my dad has retired from the force. He just crossed 55 recently and announced his retirement around the same time, even though it's not exactly mandatory for him right now. But he's been having a lot of problems with his heart, so he decided to take an early retirement. This happened just a couple of months ago, and I found out about it from other family members, but he still has connections with his colleagues on the force, and I know for a fact that if he wanted to, he definitely would have been able to bail my brother out. Besides, I think posting it on Facebook did a lot more damage to my brother's reputation, and that's exactly what I had wanted, so I don't really regret not calling the cops on him. I think I did the right thing. Coming to Jackson and what kind of drugs he was taking, I'm not really sure about that, but all I know is that none of what he was doing was legal. Not just drugs, but he's also involved in a lot of other shady things because I know for a fact that he hasn't worked since his business flopped a couple of years back, and yet he has still managed to be able to pay rent and live in an apartment of his own. Of course, it's very likely that my parents have been supporting him financially, but even then, I'm sure that they haven't been giving him money to party, and his Instagram feed is just full of pictures of him living it up with his friends. I don't know exactly what he's involved in, but I know that it can't be anything good because if he has been able to raise money for himself without working hard, I'm pretty sure he's doing something illegal and dishonest, and my dad has been helping him cover it up. So, he's not really the honest and upright cop that he has been pretending to be for everyone else, and that's why I don't see any reason for me to take that post down and protect his reputation. They did have a valid point that they had tried to contact me several times in the past couple of years, but the reason that I had never accepted their attempts to contact me was because I had always known that for them, My brother was more of a priority than me. Even in this current situation, it was the truth. They claimed that they had cut him off but still spoke to him so they could get me to take the post down, so they didn't really cut him off, and what they said to me was pointless. I was a bit confused at the time because I was feeling a lot of mixed emotions, but after reading the comments on my post, I realized that I didn't really have to take that post down. My family deserves every bit of the hate that they are getting right now. They have brought it on to themselves, and I'm not the bad guy in this situation in the slightest. So, it's been 9 days now, and the post is still up. I got my car repainted already. I didn't think there was any point in waiting for my parents or my brother to cough up the money that they owed me, and besides, it was not about money for me in the first place. I think I have made that very clear. But in spite of that, my brother has not given up. Jackson keeps texting me again and again saying that he really is sorry and that he's ready to send me whatever amount I ask for, which is just another indicator that he's definitely involved in something shady, because otherwise, where is he getting that money from since my parents just told me that they have cut him off? I'm pretty sure they're not giving him the money. Anyway, he keeps texting me, and I just have to keep ignoring it because all I want is an apology, and a public one at that. Unless and until I get one, that post is staying up. At this point, even if I do take it down, it's going to be pretty pointless because everyone has seen it. The entire family has ostracized Jackson and my parents. Literally not one person wants to speak to them anymore. As for whoever went to school with us, most of them have reached out to tell me that they are not surprised that Jackson turned out like this. He had always been a bit of a brat and thought that he could always get away with everything, and that was true, but not this time, unfortunately for him. The only people who have not spoken to me after that last phone call are my parents, and I genuinely have no idea what they have been up to. Truth be told, I really don't understand why it's so difficult for my family to just acknowledge and accept their mistakes and apologize for them to me. It's a very simple and reasonable condition in my opinion, and yet they are acting as if I've asked for the world. It's really sad, but I'm not surprised that they are acting like this. They've always been this way, and I for one am glad that I cut them off 9 years back because they don't deserve to be a part of my life in the first place. Update 2. So, my parents decided to pay me a visit today, but it was not just them who showed up. Their family lawyer came along with them. My mom's older brother, my uncle, is a pretty great attorney, but I'm not sure why exactly he decided to be coming along with my parents to visit and intimidate me. It was the weekend, so I was at home in the morning when they came by, and when I saw them standing outside, I decided to invite them in because I was really curious about what they had to say. As soon as they were inside, my parents told me that they were there to talk about the post and said that they would be forced to file a defamation lawsuit against me if I did not take it down. I wish I could say that I felt threatened or intimidated in the slightest, but I was just amused that they thought that. Anyway, when they told me that they would be filing a lawsuit for defamation against me, my uncle decided to show me the paperwork for it, which had already been prepared by him, just to show me that they were serious about this and not just bluffing to scare me. Unfortunately, even the paperwork and the presence of a lawyer didn't scare me. I just told my parents that they were free to do whatever they wanted. In fact, I didn't even understand why they felt obliged to come to my home and give me a warning before they went through with the lawsuit. They had no need to do that, and after saying that, I told them that since they had made up their mind, they were free to leave because I had also made up my mind, and I was not going to go back on my word. So, I was definitely not taking the post down until I had received a public apology from Jackson. But they refused to get up. They remained seated, and my dad tried to drive home the point that they were trying to make. That they were giving me a chance to avoid a lawsuit and a lot of trouble by just taking that stupid post down, and I needed to take it seriously instead of laughing it off. When I stayed silent and did not say anything, my dad decided to slam his fist against my coffee table, and that's what really pissed me off because it's very expensive, and I did not want him to cause any damage to it. His son had already damaged my car, and I had to pay for it. I was not going to allow another one of those incidents to take place. So I told him to get out of my house because it was very obvious that neither he nor his son were capable of having a civilized conversation and acting like decent human beings, and I had absolutely no interest in interacting with them. My uncle said nothing but pulled my dad back, and my mother tried to salvage the situation by trying to reason with me. She was trying to bargain with me and kept saying that we could save a lot of time by just forgetting about that, and that could only happen if I deleted it. I did not even need to forgive them or whatever, but I had had enough. I just told them that I did not want to negotiate with them, and I honestly did not believe that they had the guts to go through with the lawsuit because that would create more trouble for them than it would for me. And most importantly, the thing about defamation lawsuits is that the entire basis of the lawsuit is that it's only valid if the other person is lying. Everyone knew that I wasn't lying, so filing a lawsuit against me would only bring out their truth, and I was all for it. Then my dad started screaming and cursing at me, and I lost my temper, so I reciprocated by doing the same thing. Naturally, it turned into a shouting match soon enough, and my dad got so worked up that he started punching the wall and was eventually able to make a hole in it. My uncle had tried to stop him from doing it, but there was no point. He had been trained as a cop, and it was actually pretty scary to watch him punch a hole in my wall. But after he was done, what he did was what pissed me off even more. He took out a wad of cash from his wallet, threw it onto my coffee table, and then walked out after saying that I could contact him if I needed more. It was incredibly disturbing and disrespectful to me, and it was then that I decided that I was going to have to pursue this legally. It had become very obvious to me that both my dad and Jackson are unhinged, and I don't want them around me at any point now. Initially, it had just been funny to mess with them, but clearly, there's something very wrong with both of them because I can't imagine normal people behaving like this. So, I had a talk with my lawyer and told him everything that had happened right from the beginning. Of course, he already knew about the incident with my car since I had posted about it online, and now we are thinking about getting a restraining order against my family. I definitely qualify for it, especially after what happened today. A lawsuit will also be particularly helpful in bringing out the truth about my family, and I think that's really necessary at this point. People should know what kind of scum I'm dealing with because they really are the worst of the worst. So, I'm actually looking forward to going against them right now. Update 3. Hey, so in my last update, I said that I was going to file a lawsuit and a restraining order against my family, and I finally did that last week. The legal proceedings have started, and I only recently discovered from a couple of old school friends that Jackson had apparently become a full-fledged drug dealer. It wasn't even like he was selling weed to college kids. He was dealing with hard drugs and had managed to build an elite clientele for himself. Like spoiled rich trust fund brats or upper management folks from the corporate world, you know exactly the kind of people that I'm talking about. And I'm actually surprised that he was able to do this. But I guess it's a good thing that he's finally found his niche. I guess that's why he was actually jealous of me because obviously, I'm doing far better than him in life right now because I'm a successful entrepreneur and he's a drug dealer. So even though he parties every weekend, it's nothing compared to the life that I have, and nobody is really proud of him. It's going to be hard to prove that he is a dealer, but I'm sure that a bit of fair investigation will reveal everything in due course. Right now, it's just based on rumors, but I have my faith in the judicial system, and anyway, at least I received an explanation as to how he was able to maintain the kind of lifestyle that he had without any apparent source of income. So that's what's going on with my brother. I don't really think that my parents had cut him off at any point because the last time that I saw them after our court hearing, they seemed to be pretty chummy. I don't think they would have been able to patch things up so quickly, especially if my dad had been telling me the truth about cutting him out of his life. Honestly, I'm just glad that I did not give my parents a chance, and I went with my gut feeling. They are truly terrible people, and I'm just hoping that when the verdict finally comes through, it's against them. So far, it seems like it's going to be, and I'm keeping my fingers crossed. My lawyer and I are going to leave no stone unturned to make sure that they get what they deserve. I have the entire family on my side, and I also have a lot of friends who are willing to testify if it comes down to it. Even my neighbors, who had heard the wall getting punched repeatedly on the day that my father had visited, are willing to testify against him. So at least I'm going to be able to get a restraining order against them for sure, and that's still good enough for me. About the rest of it, I'll deal with it as it happens. For now, I'm just really happy that I'm getting the kind of closure that I needed. I hadn't even realized how much pent-up anger and frustration I had within me because of my family until recently, and I don't know if this is the most productive way to deal with it or not, but at least I am dealing with it and confronting my feelings. So I'm pretty proud of myself, and I know that this is going to work out. Now on to the next story. Story 5. I wired my family $72,000 over 5 years, but they smirked and mocked me. I stayed silent and began planning their financial funeral. They handed me a mug that said, "Stop asking why, just pay and smile." I smiled, and 24 hours later, Their phones were blowing up, and not with money, but consequences. They were phoning in a panic. The following morning, my mother held up her wine glass and said, "Come on, it's funny." As the Easter centerpiece softly shaded her face with an uncontrollable smile, I sat there in silence, holding that mug that Ashley had just given me. "Stop asking why, just pay and smile." Everyone chuckled. Dad laughed too from his side of the table. Ashley made a fictitious toast with her glass. She continued, "To our sponsor." And then, as if it were the joke she had been waiting all night to say, Mom added, "You're not our son, you're our sponsor." More than laughing, the words lingered in the air. I had recently sent $18,000 to pay for Mom's second root canal, Ashley's small fender incident that inexplicably required a whole bumper replacement, and their past-due mortgage. After cutting short my work trip to attend to their emergency, I hadn't even finished unpacking, and now this. "Ashley?" I uttered, clutching the mug in my hands. "Where did you even find this?" She smiled and said, "Oh, I had it custom-made. Thought it fit. You're always stressing about why you're the one helping everyone. We just thought we..." First, I glanced at my mother, then at my father. Mom grinned. "Don't be so sensitive. You've always been the generous one." Dad never even raised his head from his phone. "It's just a joke, relax." "Correct, it's a joke." They joked last Christmas that since I essentially managed the household, I should deduct family expenses from my taxes. Or how, when I was promoted at work, they made a joke about upgrading their sponsor. I surveyed the table. Ashley was wearing her expensive pastel dress, which I bought for her after she said she couldn't afford an Easter-appropriate outfit. Dylan, her fiancé, stuffed his face as if it were a free buffet, which it was. Mom, grinning as if she hadn't just used tears and shame to persuade me to settle her credit card bill. And Dad, not there as usual unless someone needed funding, fixing, or signing something. Mom went on, "Isn't this nice? A real family holiday." It wasn't pleasant. It wasn't real at all. It was a show, and the entire show was sponsored by me. I gave them the smile they requested, and something silently and irrevocably broke inside of me at that very instant. This was not always the case, or perhaps it was, and I was simply too preoccupied with trying to be helpful to see the rot taking hold. I was raised to believe that love was based on favors, that being the one who could be relied upon meant being the one who was loved, that they would eventually look at me the way they looked at Ashley if I put in enough effort, gave enough, and solved enough problems. However, I was mistaken. In actuality, they had owned Ashley from the beginning. Their miracle, their pride, their evidence that they were correct. I was also a resource, a backup plan, a moving safety net, an instrument that bends. It began slowly, it always does. I covered Ashley's rent for 3 months after her first venture failed. I paid for Mom's dental work twice when it became critical. Guess who kept the lights on at home when Dad's old friend was unable to repay a loan? Me. Always me. They also gave me the impression that I was making up for something each time I took the initiative, as if I owed them. "You know we gave up a lot to raise you," Mom would add if I was hesitant to send money. Dad once said, "We didn't ask you to be successful, so you could hoard it all." In response to my inquiry about reimbursing Ashley for her auto insurance, Ashley had her own version too. "It's not like we're strangers, we're family. You know I'd help you if things were reversed." However, they never were, since I ensured they weren't because I sacrificed my life to be the one who was never in debt, problems, or need. 6 months ago, the first real crack appeared. Ashley sobbed when she called me regarding Dylan's business. "It's falling apart," she cried. "If we don't cover the next round of equipment, he'll lose everything. Please, you know I'd never ask unless we were desperate." That following evening, I transferred $4,700. A week later, I noticed her in a picture at a posh winery, laughing, sipping a glass of wine, and Dylan flashing a Rolex next to her. "Weekend," reads the caption. Well deserved. I remained silent. Rather, I thought perhaps it was sponsored. It might have been old. Perhaps she needed the respite. However, the pictures continued to appear. High-end footwear, brunches, new iPhone, and then the Easter meal, using the mug, the derision, the joke from the sponsor. After that night, I began going through my accounts. I traveled back 5 years. $72,850. I had given them that amount, given, not borrowed, in gifts, bailouts, transfers, payments, and emergency coverage. When I saw the total, my hand trembled. I gave my bank a call. 3 joint cards were frozen. I updated all of my passwords on the internet. Established a fresh savings account. I transferred my remaining funds there. I received a text from Mom that evening. "Hey honey, can you send $600? I forgot to pay the HOA and they're threatening a fine. Just till Monday." I didn't respond. Ashley, 10 minutes later. "Mom says you're mad. Is this about the mug? Come on, don't be weird. It's just a joke. Nothing has changed." Then Mom, at midnight. "We didn't mean anything by it. You know we appreciate you. Don't make this a thing." I gazed at the display. Respect me? Like when they thanked me for driving 6 hours in the snow to pick up Dad from the emergency room because Ashley needed to go to the spa, for example. They didn't include me in the Maui family vacation since you wouldn't want to spend money on such a thing, right? No, this was not a show of gratitude. It was addiction. The version of me that paid discreetly and made no requests was the one they were addicted to. Withdrawal is cruel. All right. Ashley arrived at my flat early the following morning. She walked in like she owned the place as soon as I opened the door. "Seriously?" she said abruptly. "You're ignoring us now?" My back was to the counter. "You mean like how you ignored my last raise? My last birthday? And every time I said I was overwhelmed?" She laughed. "You're making a scene over a joke mug?" "No," I replied. "I'm making a scene over $72,000 and zero respect." She stopped talking after that. She blinked. "What are you talking about?" "I've tracked every penny I've sent in the last 5 years," I replied. "Every emergency, every loan you never paid back, every phone call that ended with me feeling like I owed you something." Defensive, Ashley crossed her arms. "We're family. You're supposed to help." "No," I replied. "I did help. I helped you stay comfortable while calling me uptight. I helped Mom pay off her cards while she called me paranoid. I helped Dad with his projects while he told people I was cold." She gave an eye roll. "This is so dramatic. What, you're cutting us off now? Going to punish us?" I grinned. "No," I muttered. I stopped asking why, and for once, I smiled while saying no. I couldn't get that smile off my face the remainder of the evening. Apparently, word got out quickly because the following evening, I received an invitation with the subject line, "Let's clear the air," for a family Zoom call. It was sent by Ashley. She did, of course. Not being at the heart of resolution was something she could never tolerate. The call began around 7 p.m. sharp. Ashley exuded strategic appeal with her immaculate appearance. Mom exercised concern and was all pearls. Dad, as usual, silent, uninvolved. Dylan hung in the background, his shoulders partially out of sight, as though he was worried that guilt would spread. "Hey, there he is!" exclaimed Ashley. "Glad you made it. We figured it's time to move on. Right?" Mom said, "Of course," and nodded. "It's Easter season. Time to heal. Family first." With ease and control, I grinned. Glad we're all on the same page. Ashley started off with a self-congratulatory speech about how sticking together makes us stronger and that tension isn't healthy. Sounded to me like background jazz. I accessed my banking app on my phone after unlocking it beneath the table. When I opened the insurance dashboard, Ashley was in the middle of saying something about reestablishing confidence. Ashley's Toyota Corolla from 2021, registered under my name, paid on a monthly basis, automatic payment of $249. I selected Cancel, Confirm Policy, then changed tabs, DMV website. Ashley receives ownership from me. Submitted. Let's get back to banking. A last flourish. Give Ashley $1. Message. I will never give you another money. Put it in a frame. Click. Completed. Her cell rang. She frowned, blinked, and looked down. What is this? I took a drink of my tea. I just took care of something important. Mom narrowed her eyes. What kind of important? I grinned and leaned in. Don't worry, you'll feel it by tomorrow. After that, I unmuted myself, selected Leave Meeting, and saw their bewildered, frozen faces disappear like vapor. My phone's chime verified everything. The money has been sent, canceled insurance, transfer of title. Additionally, Ashley received a legal email in her mailbox informing her that she was now the proud owner of her own mess. At precisely 9:17 in the morning, Ashley's vehicle vanished from her driveway. She texted me as soon as she noticed it, so I know that. Ashley, have you canceled my policy? Ashley, really? Ashley, I've lost my automobile. Towed. Ashley, it's insane. Give me a call now. I didn't respond. After an hour, my mother began phoning, next my father, then Dylan. In less than an hour, 8 calls were lost. I was aware of what would happen next. We need to talk, Dad texted. 5 p.m. on Sunday. Only family. No justifications. Excellent. I arrived without a smile on my face, guilt-free, without regrets. I knew they would all be there, and they were. My mother with her arms folded like a disgruntled educator. My father, hands on his lap, tense. Ashley, hair disheveled, phone gripped like a weapon. No car keys visible. Dylan, silent, pale-eyed, and flitting, sat off to the side. Sit, Dad muttered. I remained upright. Mom yelled, "You think this is funny? What you did to your sister. The humiliation. The danger." I arched my eyebrow and asked, "Danger? You mean finally making her responsible for her own property? That kind of danger?" Ashley's voice was shrill and scared as she jumped in. "You had my car towed?" "No," I replied. "You had your car towed. I just stopped paying for it." I took a big, well-organized, color-coded folder out of my bag, saying, $72,850. I placed it flat on the coffee table. "That's how much I've given this family over the last 5 years." Everyone fell silent. "I'm not asking anymore. I'm demanding repayment." With a harsh, trembling laugh, Mom laughed. "You can't be serious." "Oh, I am," I replied. "For the first time in my life, I'm dead serious." I opened the folder. Included are well-highlighted bank statements, transfer logs, Zelle screenshots, and auto payment plans. "I've split the amount between the 3 of you," I said. Mom, $23,700. Ashley, $38,600. Dad, $10,550. "I expect a payment schedule. I'll give you 90 days. Dad got to his feet, his voice low and irate. "You think you can treat your family like debtors?" "No," I replied. "I think you've been treating me like an ATM with a guilt complex. I'm just doing the math." Ashley gave an eye roll. "So what, you're keeping score now? You said you were doing all this out of love. And you said you respected me. Then you gave me a mug that said, 'Stop asking why. Just pay and smile.'" I grabbed another document and slid it in their direction. "Remember that emergency line of credit I opened for the family 3 years ago? The one Mom called just a formality?" I looked at the signature. "It's binding legally. So yes, I can sue." The space was still. Dylan said something to himself. "What?" yelled Ashley. He glanced back at her after glancing at me. His voice wavered. "I told you this would happen. I told you he'd fight back." "You told him?" she yelled out. "Are you kidding me? I trusted you." He stated, "You said he'd never push back, that he was too soft." Ashley's mouth quivered once more. Mom jumped in. "You're overreacting. You're going to destroy this family." "No," I replied. "I'm just closing my accounts." I then took out the $1 transfer printout. I let it fall to the table. Transaction note. "I will never give you another money. Put it in a frame." I walked toward the door and added, "And if you think this is betrayal, then you haven't even begun to understand what losing me actually means." As I walked away, nobody spoke. They were unable to do it. For the first time, the quiet was deafening. No one reached out when I left that living room with my folder and their jaws on the floor. No angry texts, no calls of guilt. Ashley didn't even post one passive-aggressive meme. It was joy. My phone was silent for the first time in years. Quiet not because they were ignoring me, but because I had earned it. I wasn't frozen. I had freedom. Even while I would love to say that I moved on right away, doubt did start to creep in. 3 days following the showdown, while deciding whether to switch brands to save money, I was standing in front of the oat milk section at the grocery store when I had the idea. What if I was too harsh? What if I had been able to manage it better? Then, as if on cue, my phone buzzed. Ashley was the one. Ashley, Mom's blood pressure went up, just so you know. She claims that the stress you produced is the reason. It was there like the head of a snake. Emotional coercion, guilt, and blame were all remnants of the old cycle. I didn't flinch this time, though. Me was the second word I typed back. Blocked. I meant it too. The consequences were immediate. Mom unexpectedly arrived at my apartment building 2 days later. Only because I was buzzed by the front desk did I know. She says she's your mother and it's an emergency. I didn't even inquire about the nature of the situation. Tell her the sponsor's out of service. That was all I said. However, their desperation wasn't the most outrageous thing. It was the pleasure it brought. I was returning to the gym, improving the quality of sleep, making food without causing tension. I browsed my financial app. I felt as though my flat had been holding ghosts that I had been unaware of until I expelled them. Then one evening, I received an unexpected message. Not from Ashley. Not from my folks. From Dylan. Dylan, can we have a conversation? I realized this is strange. I spent some time looking at the screen. I couldn't tell if it was bait or not. I couldn't be certain if he was a puppet. But I was intrigued. Speak. Not a favor. Not guilty. Simply speak. Dylan. I understand. I do. I have a message for you. By themselves, the following day we decided to meet in a coffee shop. Land that is neutral. He appeared as though he hadn't had any sleep in a week. He sat down and began. I'm not here to defend Ashley. Good, I replied. Because I'm not interested in hearing it. He gave a nod. I'm here because I think I'm done too. I took notice of that. I watched her lie to your face. I watched your parents let it happen, and I kept waiting for them to show some decency. But they didn't. Now she's talking about suing you for emotional distress, he said, running a hand through his hair. I blinked. Seriously? He gave a nod. She's spiraling, and honestly, I don't think she believes it'll work. She just wants to punish you. I reclined. And where do you stand? He gave me a direct glance. I'm out. I'm done financing delusion. I've already spoken to a lawyer. I'm filing for separation. That's done more for me than any punch she could have thrown. I apologize for not speaking up sooner, he continued. I should have. You were the only one holding everything together. I was just trying to stay afloat for a while. We sat in silence. Then he gave me an envelope just before I left. There's a check within. $1,000. Memo, toward what they owe you. I know it's not much, he stated. But it's from me, not them. I figured you deserved to know someone saw you. I felt the sting of genuine tears behind my eyes for the first time in years. Not out of anguish, but out of approval. I accessed the family debt spreadsheet on my laptop that evening. I wrote, paid $1,000 with sincerity, next to Dylan's name. I then changed the file's name to Closure in Progress. I poured a glass of nice wine for myself, the kind I saved for vacations that were invariably marred by forced smiles and more constrained spending plans. I drank to myself this time, to the tranquility, to the limits, to the liberty of having no sponsors. 3 months have gone by. It has been 90 days since I left that house, dropped the folder on their coffee table, and broke my silence. Since then, I haven't seen them. After about the 4th week, the calls ceased. By week 6, the texts had decreased. Ashley has reportedly been taking time to heal, which I presume is code for finding a new idiot to support her lifestyle, according to mutual pals. I didn't give a damn. I had lost my anger. They have never been able to comprehend that. I'm done, I said, not in a furious manner. I intended to say finished, as if a chapter had been concluded, like an internal door bolted. I was no longer a sponsor, and I was now a man with a future free of shame, pleading, and emotionally ruined people bearing my last name. I moved out of state for a new job. Less chaos, better pay. The new flat was a place free of the echoes of past phone conversations and frantic pleas for money. I began attending a boxing gym. I was finally able to fight, not because I wanted to. Once more, I had my own schedule. This my money. This my energy. I became pals, not the sort that remembered your birthday and didn't give you bills masquerading as emotional needs or the kind that desired something. I even went back to dating someone who was tranquil, someone nice. What do you need today? As opposed to, can you help? Just this once? For the first time in 10 years, life wasn't simply better. It was real. Then last Sunday, precisely 90 days after the altercation, an unforeseen event occurred. I received word of a deposit. Mom gave me $1. The memo? I assumed you would like the mug to be appropriately framed. For an entire minute, I gazed at it. I initially believed it to be bait, a joke, an attempt to entice me back in via passive-aggressive tactics. Then, though, there was another alert. An additional $1 from Dad. Interest. People say, I owe you more. Then 30 minutes later, Ashley gave me $2.50. Not a message, nothing but quiet. It was unbelievable to me. It was absurd. Symbolic. Petty. Perhaps they were making fun of me. Nevertheless, for the first time in weeks, I burst out laughing. I almost spilled my coffee, laughing so hard because all of a sudden I understood that they were finally carrying out a request I had made for years. They were repaying me in the tiniest, most reluctant manner imaginable. However, it had begun. Perhaps that is what frightened them the most. Not the cash. Not the quiet. However, I ultimately forced them to face the consequences. However, the twist wasn't that. Later that evening, the twist was revealed. My phone buzzed again when I was enjoying a beer and admiring the city lights from my balcony. It wasn't an SMS message. My bank sent me a notification. $3,000 had been paid. Ashley is the sender. Memo? Not at all. I blinked, revitalized, checked once more. It was authentic. $3,000. Not a message, no justification. However, I was aware this was hardly a sacrifice for peace. It was terror. Fear that I might actually file a lawsuit, that I wasn't playing a bluff, that she had lost her power. She had misjudged me. They all had. And now they were attempting to re-enter the version of me that paid the bill and remained silent. Too little, too late. Only this time I saved the screenshot. I took it in the same folder where I kept track of their debt. After that, I gave that folder a new name, Closure Confirmed. I gave $1,000 of that money to a nearby women's shelter the following morning. I transferred the remaining funds to a fresh savings account called Rebuilt from Ash, because this narrative was just that. Not retaliation, not discipline. Recovery. I regained my time, my funds, my name, and above all, my tranquility. And as I stood in my new flat, which was bright and full of plants and had no signs of coercion, I muttered as I gazed around, this is what family should feel like. Now on to the next story. Story 6. My dad refused to spend Christmas with my wife, and now my mom is blaming my wife for everything. What should I do? Original post. This is a throwaway account as I have work colleagues on my feed that I don't want to know about my family drama. And spelling will be rubbish as I'm fuming right now. Obligatory names have been changed. For the backstory, I, 36F, am married to the love of my life, 36F. K. We met when we were 17. She was out and proud, whilst I was still in the closet, so we didn't start dating until I came out at 21. We got married in 2019 and have an adopted 4-year-old son, Jack. This comes in relevant in a minute. My sister, Sarah, 27F, has a long-term boyfriend, Steve, 28M, who the family cannot stand. They've been together for 8 years, and the whole family has hated him from the first time we met him. He is rude, obnoxious, arrogant, and all in all a crappy human being. He's also someone that likes to claim that he is just honest. But if someone is honest back to him, he flips out and sulks like a toddler. In fact, my toddler is better behaved than him. He isn't abusive to Sarah and doesn't direct these comments towards her. It's just the rest of us. He's actually a good partner to her and treats her well, which is his one redeeming quality. My dad and Kay hate him the most and will do anything to avoid him at family gatherings. Kay usually just ignores him and brushes off anything he says to her as she doesn't like conflict. However, there have been a few occasions that she has said something back, but it's usually said in a joking manner, which amuses my dad to no end. My mom is a peacekeeper and will do anything to avoid drama, so she just changes the topic whenever he starts, but she and my grandparents all hate him just as much as the rest of us. Sarah is the only one that obviously doesn't hate him. Our son's birth mother, Tess, was Kay's best friend who sadly died in 2021. This was a real shock as she had an underlying heart condition that she didn't know about and simply went to sleep one night and never woke up. Jack had been left alone in his cot all day screaming for his mom before Kay got worried that Tess wasn't answering her texts and went to their house to see if she was okay. She found Jack in his cot and Tess in her bed. We adopted Jack as no one in Tess's family was in a position to take him in. We raise him as our own, but he knows who Tess is. Obviously, this is a very sensitive topic for Kay as it was so traumatic for her and Jack. Now on to what happened last weekend. It was the anniversary of Tess's death on Saturday. So Kay, Jack, and I went to visit her grave. Kay is always quiet after going to see her, and this time of year is especially hard for her. On Sunday, we had a family gathering at my parents' house. These happen every couple of months as just a catch-up for everyone. At first, nothing was out of the ordinary. Kay and my dad were off to the side talking as usual. Only I could see that Kay was obviously struggling, so my dad and she went for a walk so she could clear her head. This is something they have done before, so nothing too unusual. However, Steve had an issue with this and asked why they had left and why he wasn't invited to walk with them. I explained that Tess and Kay just needed a minute. This wasn't good enough for Steve though, and he said she should have gotten over it by now. At this, my granddad, who is naturally a very quiet guy, said that his best friend had died over 20 years ago, and he still had days where he missed him so much it hurt. You don't just get over something like that. Steve shut up at that. Kay and my dad got back, and she was in a much better mood. We all sat down at the table for our late lunch and started chatting. Everything was fine at first until Steve started trying to butt into Kay's conversation with my granddad. When it was obvious that they weren't going to include him, he very loudly stated, "This is because she's getting all the attention because her friend died 3 years ago. Get over it for EF's sake." We're all sick of hearing about it. The whole table went silent, and I took one look at Kay and knew she was about to go off on Steve. Only it didn't happen the way I thought. Rather than exploding at him, she looked at him very calmly and said that she and Granddad weren't talking about Tess. They were making plans to take him to the Christmas markets, but if he wants to be a dick, then no problem. She then went on to say to him that everyone in the family hates him because he's a toxic narcissist, that whenever he can't come to a family gathering, the whole family is much happier, that there is a reason he has no friends, and that his own family can't stand to be around him. That reason is that he's rotten from the inside out and that Tess may have only been on this planet for 32 years, but she made a bigger impact on people than he would have if he lived until he was 150. That her funeral was rammed with people because she was so loved, whereas he'd be lucky if anyone other than Sarah was at his. After that, she got up and went to the back garden and I followed her. A few minutes later, my dad came out and said that he'd told Sarah and Steve to leave. We went back inside, and Kay apologized to everyone and said she should have just kept her mouth shut. Everyone other than my mom told her what she had done was right and it was about time someone told him. My dad then found it hilarious that a lesbian had been the one to tell him straight, which lightened the mood a lot. We spent the rest of the afternoon there before going to pick Jack up from Kay's mom's house as she had had him overnight on Saturday for us. The reason I'm making this post is that yesterday I got a call from Sarah saying that she and Steve wanted an apology from Kay or they weren't going to Christmas. When I reminded her that we wouldn't be at Christmas either, as it is our year to spend it with Kay's mom, so it made no difference to us, she got really upset saying that she wanted an apology because Kay was way out of line. I said she wasn't and that I wouldn't even contemplate asking her to apologize because I agreed with everything she said, and so did everyone else there. She ended the call and I just went back to work. Then today, my dad called me and asked if Kay's mom would mind a few more for Christmas as he was refusing to spend it with Steve. So he and my granddad needed somewhere else to go. Apparently, after Sarah had called me, she called Mom and started ranting, and my mom had told my dad to get Kay to apologize, which he said no to, and they had an argument. My dad has now decided that he's done with Steve, even if that affects his relationship with Sarah. He's not having it anymore. My mom wants Sarah there, and she won't go without Steve, so my dad is going somewhere else, and my granddad agreed with him. I texted Kay's mom, and she said they were welcome. So now my mom is furious and saying that my dad and Kay are ripping the family apart. So basically, this has turned into a shit show. Kay has said she will apologize if I want her to keep the peace, but I've told her no way. Everything she said was true. I just don't know where to go from here, and the people in my life all hate Steve so much that Kay could have physically attacked him and they would all still think she is in the right. So that's why I'm asking internet strangers who might have had to deal with difficult family members. What can we do to get into a place where we can be around each other amicably? I'm struggling to see a way right now. Wow, I didn't realize how long this got until I went to post it. Sorry about that. Some of OP's comments. Comment 1. For things to be peaceful, both parties need to want it. Kay did nothing wrong. I would never spend another moment with Steve. I would let Sarah know I love her and will see her anytime, anywhere, but I'll never see Steve again. If you have one guest that basically wants to shit on the holiday table, there's no path forward with them. OP. If it was just Sarah upset, then I wouldn't care, but it's my mom. She tries so hard to keep the whole family together, and she is devastated by what's going on. If it wasn't for her, then Sarah could go take a running jump for all I care right now. Sarah. This is the issue. Steve and Sarah don't see anything wrong in what he's done. It was just him being honest. I would be happier for her to apologize if Steve and Sarah admitted that what he said was in the wrong as well. Without that, I'm being stubborn about it. My dad told Kay he will fall out with her if she apologizes as she did nothing wrong. There was no screaming or shouting. She said it very calmly. I feel like I'm stuck between making my mom happy and doing what I believe to be right. Comment 2. My sister doesn't see anything wrong in what he says as he's just being honest, but loses it when someone is honest back. I don't understand her anymore. Mom taking the high road and rising above it have been two of my mom's favorite things to say to us over the years. I just feel like enough is enough. He crossed a line this time that he can't come back from. I especially don't want my son around him when he's saying things like that about Tess. Comment 3. If I hear my mom say, "Take the high road one more time," I'm going to scream. I'm sick of the high road. I've been on it for 8 years. I'm happy on the low road now. Later that day. OP, well, I've just found out that my granny and pa, my mom's parents, are going to my uncle's for Christmas, and Steve is not invited. So it looks like it's going to be just Mom, Sarah, and Steve for Christmas this year. How OP feels about that? Vindicated, as my mom is like her parents. They're all peacekeepers, and if ever they have had enough, then it just shows that he's not just stepped over the line. He's run right past it. Mom, Kay's mom has already told her that if she changes her mind, then she is welcome at her house, even if it's Christmas morning. She is more than welcome. Obviously, Steve and Sarah aren't invited at all, but it's good that my mom has the option at least. Later reflection. I have realized that he has been trying to target Kay and my dad's relationship as they are very close. They have traveled all over the country visiting classic car shows together, which Steve has tried to get in on, but he doesn't know anything about cars, so there's no point in him going, even if they did like him. I actually think he's been trying to push Kay and I out of the family so that he gets my dad to himself, even though my dad can't stand him. Update. Hi, I know how much this community loves an update, so I thought I would give you one as things seem to be sorting themselves out, kind of. After I wrote my last post, a few things happened in the next couple of hours. First thing was that I spoke to my grandparents on my mom's side. They were there when this all happened, but they're like my mom and just constantly try to keep the peace. That's where she gets it from. They were supposed to be spending Christmas with my mom this year but had changed their minds and decided to spend it with my uncle instead. They have made the decision to not be around Steve either, as he causes too much drama. They asked if they could come and see us and Jack on the 23rd before they head off to my uncle's, which I happily agreed to. This really surprised me and it outright shocked my mom as, like I said, They are the biggest, take the high road type people I've ever met. But even they'd had enough. The next thing that happened was my dad called to let me know that Steve and Sarah had now decided that they want Kay to make a public apology in front of the whole family and admit she was lying and that the family loved Steve. He was laughing as he told me this and called them delusional, so any small chance of a superficial apology went out the window. The third thing that happened was Jack getting home from the after-school club with a recorder that I'm sorely tempted to shove up the teacher's backside. So all in all, it wasn't a great day. Through talking to people on here, I also realized that Steve has been trying to push Kay and I out of the family, organizing trips that he knows we wouldn't be able to go on. We wouldn't have gone on them anyway, as a weekend away with him sounds worse than a paper cut to the eyeball, and him constantly trying to get my dad away from Kay whenever we are all together. I think this is because he is jealous of Kay and Dad's relationship, as they're very close and go on trips to classic car shows several times a year together, usually with my granddad as well. Anyway, things went quiet for a few days until the weekend. Our town has a big Christmas fair that runs from November through December, and we always go to it with Mom, Dad, Granddad, and Kay's mom. We decided to cheer my mom up a bit to go on Sunday and then out for dinner after. My mom was told that if Sarah or Steve showed up, then we would all leave, and she promised they wouldn't be there. Things were a bit awkward at first but settled after a while. At one point, Jack got my mom and Dad to take him on the giant snowslide, and as my mom walked back over to us, she had tears in her eyes. I pulled her to one side to see what was going on, and she said that whilst waiting in line, Jack had said he was happy Uncle Steve wasn't here. When my mom asked why, he said that Uncle Steve was a bad man. My mom tried to say that he wasn't, but in typical stubborn 4-year-old fashion, he had argued and said he learned in school that people who say mean things all the time are bad people, and Uncle Steve said mean things all the time, so he was a bad man and that he didn't like him. There had been a case of bullying in his class a few weeks ago, and the teacher had done a lesson on how wrong bullying is, so I think that's where this came from. This finally broke through to my mom. If even a 4-year-old can see what a horrible prick the man is, then she had to as well. She said that she felt stuck because she hated Steve and agreed with everything that Kay has said, but she loves Sarah and doesn't want to isolate her. I told her I would always be there for her, but I wasn't putting myself, Jack, or Kay through being around Steve again, and she needed to think about what she wants, not what I want or Dad or Kay or Jack or her parents or Sarah or Steve, but what she wants. She went quiet and then said that Kay's mom had told her she was welcome at hers for Christmas if she wanted to, and that she could decide on Christmas Day if she wanted. Kay's mom would save her a plate. We went back to the group, and a little while later, I saw Mom and Kay's mom having a deep discussion whilst walking behind us. Neither will say what they talked about, but Mom seemed a bit happier after their talk. They have also been talking since, as yesterday my mom told me that she will be coming to Kay's mom's for Christmas, and they've been talking about going shopping together next week. When Mom told Sarah after calling me, Sarah predictably lost her mind and said that Mom was choosing us over her. My mom told her she was choosing to have a good Christmas rather than being belittled and made miserable, all for the sake of Steve and his so-called honesty. Sarah then called me and asked if I was happy that I'd won. She then did the unforgivable and used a few homophobic slurs towards me and Kay and called Jack the bastard of a dyke. I ended the call, blocked her everywhere, and then let my family know what had happened and that I never wanted to speak to her again. They're all as appalled as I am, and my granny, Mom's mom, called Sarah and apparently told her she was dead to her, as she won't have a bigot in the family. Sarah has been trying to reach out to apologize because she knows she has stepped over the unforgivable line, but I've just kept blocking the fake accounts that she's making on IG. Steve tried reaching out to my dad after this, and when he eventually answered, Steve tried to say that Sarah was just angry and didn't mean it. According to Mom, Dad ended up giving him a verbal lashing and told him that he was the worst thing that had ever happened to Sarah and our family. My dad has told Sarah he is disgusted with her but will be there for her if she leaves Steve. Until then, good luck. Mom has gone low contact as well but wants to keep the door open so that Sarah is not completely isolated. I had a few people saying that Steve may be abusive towards Sarah, but I really don't think he is. He usually acts like a dick when the attention isn't on him. He knows that when he says dickish things, then all the attention is on him and he revels in it. After Sarah's outburst, I just think that they're both toxic and feed off each other's toxicity. She lets him get away with the things he says because she gets pleasure out of watching us all bite our tongues and keep quiet. So mom's angry, dad's angry, our 3 grandparents are angry, extended family are angry, and Kay is being my rock, but I can tell she's really angry about what she said towards Jack. I'm just sad and done with it all. At least now I know what she really thinks about Jack, Kay, and myself, so there's that. Not the perfect update, but we move on. It will be nice this Christmas to have both sides of the family together for the first time and not have to worry about Steve being a dick. But I'm sad that this is how my relationship with my sister has ended. I'm trying to get into the Christmas spirit, but it's a tough one right now. The only things that make me smile are Kay and Jack being goofy idiots to cheer me up. However, the recorder can go to hell. I curse whoever invented the thing, like seriously, you. Thanks for all the support in my original post and opening my eyes to a few things. Maybe internet strangers are the way to go for advice after all. Hope you all have a good Christmas/holidays. Some of OP's comments. Comment 1. I don't think the Dickish Bill and Sarah saga had concluded. I'm glad you'll have a peaceful Christmas in theory. I just think the pair of them are not convinced yet that they're shut up out. OP. It wouldn't surprise me if they try and turn up to my parents for Christmas, but we won't be there, so they won't get far. As long as they stay away from me, Kay, and Jack, then I don't care what they do. Comment 2. Many small children playing recorders with more enthusiasm than skill follow Steve everywhere. OP. This just made me laugh a little too hard. Thanks for that. Editor's note. Wasn't sure whether to mark this one as concluded or ongoing. I've tentatively marked it as ongoing, but I'm happy to change it. Now on to the next story. Story 7. Twin brothers' lies destroyed my life. My parents kicked me out, and now, after years of neglect, they're asking for my money. I'm a 28-year-old female with a twin brother. Growing up, my twin brother and I had quite different treatment from our parents. For some reason, my parents were certain that my brother was destined for greatness, whereas I was labeled the black sheep since I was more interested in sports and making friends than in studying. They continually compared us, which was discouraging and damaged my self-esteem from an early age. As a child, I had to watch my brother have elaborate birthday parties for his pals, while I was treated as an afterthought. He frequently had sleepovers with his pals, whereas I was never allowed to bring my friends home. To be honest, I dreaded every moment of my youth. My grandma was the only person in the family who seemed to care about me. When she came, she always brought me my favorite chocolates and occasionally gave me a few bucks to treat myself. Later, as the years went, this overt preference for my twin brother evolved into emotional abuse directed at me. My parents would openly insult my academics and activities. No matter how hard I tried, I could never satisfy their expectations of being the ideal child. Although I excelled at athletics, they forbade me from participating in extracurricular activities because they wanted me to concentrate completely on my education, just like my brother. As a child, I felt frustrated and helpless. Later, during my sophomore year, I was grounded again, this time for using Snapchat on my phone. I hadn't done anything wrong, but like all teenagers, I downloaded the app to stay in touch with my friends. However, my parents considered this a major crime and a violation of trust because they had barred me from talking with my pals. They went crazy, flung all of my belongings around the room, ripped the doors from their hinges, and informed me I would have no privacy as long as I lived under their roof. Watching my parents attack me in this way, my identical brother, rather than sticking up for me, made things worse. Our parents' wrongful acts produced a toxic environment, allowing him to take advantage of the situation. He developed a habit of lying about me, falsely accusing me of things I never did so he could get away with everything. If he stole something, he'd easily transfer the blame onto me, and my parents, who were already inclined to believe the worst about me, happily accepted his falsehoods. He would insult me in front of my schoolmates and mock my attractiveness. Despite this, I had a large circle of friends at school because I was personable and willing to connect. My twin, on the other hand, suffered socially and disliked the fact that I could interact with others while he, as an introvert, felt uncomfortable. This jealousy boiled over during our 14th birthday party when none of his buddies came up. I'm not sure why they did that to him, but in stark contrast, my friends treated me to ice cream, and I had a fantastic day. This irritated my brother even more. To get retribution, my brother started spreading false tales about me at school, depicting me as a spoiled brat. He falsely accused me of physically assaulting him at home. Since our parents loved him more, he escalated the situation without my knowledge. To fake proof, he would punch himself, causing injuries such as a black eye or a bruised shoulder. The next day, he would boldly stroll into school, exhibiting his self-inflicted injuries as proof of my alleged assault. In fabricating stories, when our parents questioned him about the injuries, he would lie, claiming that they were the result of innocent activities, such as playing football with friends. The lies and his supposed black eyes gained traction, and many began to believe his twisted account of events. It didn't take long for whispers to spread, and my friends began to look at me suspiciously. First, I noticed minor changes. Friends who used to converse with me in the halls seemed distant, and invites to group hangouts grew fewer and farther between. It was as if a switch had been flipped, and people were unwilling to engage with the allegedly pampered girl charged with violence. One day, I got the confidence to ask my ex-best friend what had happened between us. She said that my twin brother had been circulating falsehoods about me. She disclosed the specifics of the lies he had told everyone, accusing me of actions I had never committed. I was stunned to hear her remarks. The emotion was a combination of incredulity and betrayal, as if the ground beneath me had given way. My brother, whom I grew up with, was spreading lies about me, accusing me of things I would never even consider committing. It was a betrayal that struck deep, leaving me with a knot in my stomach and a sorrowful heart. I addressed my brother the following day at school, but he chose to ignore me. I begged him to stop lying about me, but he smirked and said, "I deserve to die alone." I was at a loss for words, since his lies and actions were beginning to frighten me. I wanted to talk to my parents, but I was frightened they would believe my brother instead of me. Isolation stung, especially since I had always been open to establishing friends. My brother's jealousy-fueled lies seemed to be breaking apart the bonds I'd made over the years. The rumors spread among teachers as well. It was a weird sensation, as if I were living in a parallel realm where my genuine self was obscured by the wicked fiction told by my own twin. The lies had progressed beyond typical teenage chatter. They were now influencing how others regarded me. The unpleasant whispers swiftly reached my principal's ears, and my worst nightmare became reality. The principal summoned me and my brother, along with our parents, to his office to discuss the purported rumors. I sat there, my heart racing as the principal demanded the truth. I believed my brother would finally come clean, but he doubled down on his lies. He told the principal that the reports were real and depicted me as a bully who beat him up when our parents were not around. I could not believe it. Shock rushed over me as my brother continued to tell this twisted story about how I was jealous of him for receiving more attention from our parents. He held to his story like glue, despite the fact that it was all lies. After hearing my brother's story, my mother burst into tears and clutched him like he was a hero. My father tried to console my brother, assuring him that it was brave of him to speak up and that he would ensure that nothing bad happened to him. Following that day, I attempted to defend myself, arguing with the principal that everything was fabricated. I felt as if I was drowning in a sea of accusations, desperately trying to get to the top. But my brother persisted, saying that I was this furious, violent person who took out my emotions on him every day. My mother's tears flowed as she grabbed onto my brother and gave me accusing stares. It was like fighting against a wall of belief in my brother's fabricated story. My principal sharply chastised me, stating that the school did not accept bullying and that these were grounds for suspension. I begged him not to suspend me, but he shook his head, saying he couldn't simply let it go. I implored him, tears flowing down my cheeks, attempting to explain that I had not done anything to my brother. The principal sternly informed me that I would be suspended for 10 days so that others would not bully anyone. It hit me hard, and I began crying even more, virtually asking him to reconsider. My parents, outraged and embarrassed by the incident, hauled me out of the principal's office. I didn't want to leave. I wanted to argue my case and make them understand, but they weren't having it. We left the school, my heart full of frustration and embarrassment. When we came home, things changed drastically. My father started packing my belongings out of the blue. I was stunned, perplexed, and had no idea what was going on. My mother asked him what he was doing, but he simply yelled that he couldn't allow me to live in the same house as my brother anymore. I was crying, virtually on my knees, and begged my brother to give them the truth, but he remained cool, unmoved by my feelings. My father kept packing my belongings before throwing the bag into our foyer. I clung to my father's legs, asking him not to kick me away. It felt as if a nightmare were happening. He informed me that a bully like me did not deserve to reside in his home and that he would call his mother, my grandmother, to come and pick me up if she wished. It felt as if the world had collapsed beneath me. I stood there in amazement, surrounded by my stuff scattered over the foyer, booted out of my own home. Eventually, my grandmother showed up. She helped me grab all of my belongings and load them into the car. She helped me into the passenger seat and made sure I was wearing my seatbelt before strolling towards my parents' front door. She rang the doorbell, and when my father opened it, she began yelling at him for treating me this way. With firm determination, she informed him that if he ever approached or attempted to contact me again, she would not hesitate to call the police or CPS, because what he had done to a youngster like me might land him in jail. My mother attempted to shift blame by telling her that it was my fault. However, my grandmother was having none of it. She stood firm, defending me, and emphasized that I was only a child and did not deserve to be treated in such a harsh manner. That was the first time I realized how powerful my grandmother was. She did not cower before my parents, and unlike them, she trusted me. We eventually drove away, leaving behind my house, the only place I had ever grown up. I can't even begin to describe how excruciatingly painful I felt at the time. I recall crying on the bed and refusing to eat anything despite my grandmother's insistence. When I informed her what my brother had done, she was astonished as well. She told me that she trusted my version of the story, and I was relieved that I had at least one person on my side. When the 10-day suspension was removed, returning to school was like going back into the lion's lair. As I entered the familiar hallways, my classmates' expressions told volumes. Judgment, murmurs, and sidelong stares. The weight of the bogus charges remained in the air. Meanwhile, my brother shamelessly ignored me as if I didn't exist. He had made friends with a few people who believed his version of the tale and saw him as the victim of my attacks. I tried to tell everyone my side of the tale, but it went unheard. I was an outsider, saddled with an unfair reputation that stuck to me like a shadow. No matter where I went, the classroom, the cafeteria, or the corridors, the eyes that met mine were filled with contempt and suspicion. I became a loner. I would keep my head down, attend all of my lessons, eat lunch alone in the cafeteria, and then return home. I didn't have any friends, and it seemed like no one wanted me there. Throughout this, my parents never called to check on me. My grandmother would continuously remind me that this was not my fault and that things would eventually be fine. I graduated from high school with good grades and was looking forward to attending college where I hoped to have a better life. It wasn't until I went away to college that I discovered what freedom felt like for the first time. No one was looking over my shoulder, comparing my grades, or attempting to compete with me. I met and became friends with folks who shared my interests. Despite the mental and physical scars left by my family and classmates over the years, I focused on putting it all behind me and making the most of my college experience. During this period, I realized I had an aptitude for content writing. I'd always wanted to be a writer, but I wasn't sure if it would work out in the long run. As a result, I chose to give up on my dream. However, in order to supplement my income, I began working as a freelance writer. I signed up for several freelancing websites which helped me get tasks from well-known companies. This is how I progressively began to compile a portfolio of my work. Throughout college, I maintained my side hustle and never asked my parents for a penny. When I finished college, instead of taking a corporate job, I realized I could work full-time as a content writer. I was doing well since I had numerous clients and long-term professional ties with them, allowing me to work on multiple projects. Having a respectable freelancing business not only gave me financial independence, but it also enabled me to explore the world as a digital nomad. Traveling helped me heal from my past, even if it was not easy. I saved as much money as I could and took a gamble on myself. I've seen a lot of the world over the years, but there's always so much more to see. My grandma was the only person I considered family throughout all of this, and I cherished her. She was quite unhappy when I moved out, but she knew that I needed to be self-sufficient. Despite my tight schedule, I made it a point to be available for her whenever possible. On weekends, I would pay Mom a visit, frequently eating meals or simply sitting on the porch, absorbed in chats about everything from childhood memories to current events. On weekends, I would spend full days assisting her with household tasks or taking her to the neighboring park for a leisurely walk. I recently completed one of the most important assignments of my career. While I can't reveal the name, I was extraordinarily fortunate to write articles and product descriptions for them. After the job was completed, I asked the team I worked with to submit grade evaluations on my websites, which they were delighted to do. I grabbed screenshots of several of their evaluations and shared them on Instagram, understanding that collaborating with this brand was a big deal. As expected, several other content writers congratulated me on my professional accomplishments, and some even printed my article to help get the word out. This is how I began receiving messages from strangers who also wanted assistance with their websites. My family observed this as well, and some contacted me to express their congratulations. My college's principal eventually called me, seeing that I was doing well, and inviting me to come to the college for a seminar to talk to students about starting a career as a content writer. I was apprehensive because I'm not good at public speaking, but I decided to take a chance and consented. When I found myself standing in front of expectant faces, sharing my experiences and insights, I felt as if my life had gone full circle. In my speech, I discussed my hardships and how I pushed hard to keep going despite the difficult times. It was a truly rewarding experience to encourage others and contribute to the growth of the writing community. Some of my videos went viral on Facebook as people connected with them. It felt fantastic to be finally recognized for my efforts. Last week, I was asked to talk on a local news program. It was a show about the benefits of content creation, and they asked me to share my experiences and insights with their audience. I was nervous but yet excited about the prospect. During the event, I discussed my experiences, the value of customer feedback, and how a simple appreciation message may lead to fantastic opportunities. The opportunity to reach a larger audience and encourage more professionals in the area was both humbling and exciting. When it finally aired, I uploaded some of these snippets on Instagram, since I was honored to be invited to a TV show. This is how my relatives and cousins first learned about my professional accomplishments. Because my parents never mentioned me to anyone, they had no idea I was working with well-known brands and appearing on television shows. This is how words swiftly went among my family. I guess this TV interview must have finally reached my parents' ears, because just a few days later, I was working on another project while keeping my phone on mute. When I finished my work, I checked my phone and was surprised to find 6 missed calls from my mother. I was astonished to see her name on my phone because it had been a long time since she had phoned me. After so many years of stillness, I couldn't understand why she was phoning. I hesitantly called her back, and she answered right away. I asked her if everything was fine, and my mother began to congratulate me. My father, who was most likely sitting directly next to her, also joined in on the chat. He began to probe about my life and well-being, and I responded without much thinking. It didn't strike me as weird until they asked how much I was making these days. I explained that it was none of their business. My father answered, "We're family, so don't be shy about telling us your income." I assured him that I was doing well financially. Hearing this, my mother proceeded to describe how difficult their life was these days, and my brow furrowed in suspicion. Basically, this is how our talk went. "Mom, we're retired now, and we've wanted to renovate the house for a while. It's not in great shape, but we don't have any funds left." Me, "Okay. Mom, your achievement has given us hope. We saw your TV interview today and thought you might be able to assist us out by paying for the improvements." Dad, "After all, we are a family. Please do not hesitate to share some of your revenue with us. We genuinely need your help." Me, "Are you kidding me? Why are you asking for money when you haven't even spoken to me in years? I'm not sure what prompted you to contact me, and while I appreciate your congratulations, I won't be able to assist you." Hearing this, my mother began telling me that I was being selfish and that I needed to support them as a family. My father emphasized that as my parents, they deserved to be cared for and that this was the least I could do. I was so angry at this point that I wanted to tell them off. Suddenly, I had an idea. Instead of simply disagreeing with them, I would teach them a lesson once and for all for thinking they could mooch off of me after my parents mistreated me for so many years. I told them that I was willing to help them, provided they agreed to my demands. My father was curious and asked me what it was. Without hesitation, I made my demand. If they wanted my assistance, they had to openly confess in front of our family and friends that my brother was the mastermind behind the false stories that had harmed my reputation. I wanted them to embarrass my brother in front of everyone, just like they had humiliated me by believing his lies and manipulations. I wanted them to accept responsibility for their acts and recognize the anguish they had caused. Hearing about my untenable state, my father began to question the necessity of such an admission. My mother told me that this was all unnecessary and that we could have a private discussion without engaging others, but I stood firm. This was a non-negotiable requirement for any further aid they wanted me to provide. As the tension rose, my father raised his voice, establishing his authority as my father, and began to underline that it was my responsibility to assist my family in need. My mother, in a last-ditch effort, persuaded me to do the right thing and assist them, citing the years they had spent raising me. I couldn't help but see the irony in their sudden attractiveness. I reminded them of the past, that they had kicked me out and that my grandmother, not them, had reared me. They became increasingly angry, but I told them unequivocally that if they wanted to approach me and request financial aid, the truth had to be acknowledged publicly, and my brother had to face the consequences of his conduct. Since this talk, my parents have been calling me often, but I'm ignoring them. I'm beginning to regret even phoning them back that day. I'd like to know if I'd be a complete idiot if I didn't aid my parents. Update 1. It's been a crazy week since I last shared my story, and the outpouring of support and encouragement has been astounding. It's encouraging to know that I'm not alone at this moment. I'm happy everyone believes that I shouldn't interact with my parents or even contemplate assisting them after everything they've put me through. I gave them such a requirement since I knew they would be unable to comply. I know they love my brother too much, and even if they've realized by now that it was all his lies, I know they'll never put him through what they did to me. My brother sent me a nasty text message today after my parents tried to call me again and I refused to answer. This is what he wrote. "Hey sis, I haven't seen you in a long time, and I can tell you that every day without you has been wonderful. I heard Mom and Dad contacted you, and you offered them a strange ultimatum. You're aware that they will never go through with it, right? They plainly never loved you and will never hurt me. I admit I lied about you 15 years ago, but it's been a long time, so stop being so self-centered and attempt to move on from the past. You're unmarried and childless, so why not help them out by paying for their home repairs and renovations? Do the right thing and become a better daughter." Seeing the message felt like a stab in the chest. The hubris to reject the difficulties I had encountered and the conditions I had established revealed his lack of empathy. The attempt to guilt-trip me by emphasizing my single and childless situation added an extra degree of insensitivity. His idea that I should prioritize their needs over my own was not only disrespectful but also demonstrated how little he valued me. Fueled by dissatisfaction and a strong desire for justice, I decided it was time to take matters into my own hands and expose the truth that had been buried for far too long. I sat down to compose an email to my parents and close relatives, detailing the traumatic events of my upbringing and the unfair treatment I had received while growing up in my family home. In the email, I highlighted the tight and restrictive environment I encountered at home, as well as how my parents treated me differently from my twin brother. I also looked into the spiteful and utterly false rumor my brother had circulated about me at school, which had resulted in serious consequences and ruined my image. I wrote about how my parents had kicked me out, and if it hadn't been for my grandmother, I could have died on the streets by now. Toward the conclusion, I requested that everyone read a message my brother had sent me. I've enclosed a screenshot in which he acknowledged lying about me. It was a simple confession, and I hoped it would reveal the lies that had lasted for too long. I sent the email just an hour ago, and I know what will happen when my parents and brother see it next. I'll let you know how my family reacts to my email. Update 2. It's been a month since my previous update, and a lot has happened. As you may guess, my family erupted when they received the email. My parents have faced criticism from relatives who were previously unaware of the extent of their favoritism and emotional abuse. Many family members contacted me saying they had no idea about everything and apologized for not being there for me. My brother and dad sent me a bombardment of text messages that became increasingly hostile and aggressive. So I contacted a lawyer who issued them a cease and desist notice. It basically told them not to approach me again, and if they did, they would face severe legal penalties. I guess this spooked them since they stopped calling me. My grandmother believes I did the right thing by telling everyone what occurred, and she fully supports me. She is the only person who is important to me. Therefore, I'm delighted she has my back. Update 3. It's been 2 months since my last post, and I'm pleased to say that everything is going well in my life right now. Professionally, my article writing business has thrived. Invitations to speak at seminars and podcasts continue to come in, confirming my status as a renowned expert in my field. I'm as close to my granny as ever. I recently took a 1-week sabbatical from work to spend quality time with her. She is into gardening these days and has taught me a lot about the many flowers and herbs in her yard. My favorite and most cherished memories are of spending time with her. Whether we were sharing meals, having profound conversations, or simply enjoying one another's company. My family hasn't contacted me since they received the letter from my lawyer, so I'm glad they're staying away. Personally, I've started attending therapy in the hopes of working on my own recovery. For the time being, I believe this is the final update. Thank you very much for your support. Now on to the next story. Story 8. I caught my boyfriend cheating just before his big night. Should I expose him or exit gracefully? What should I do? I won't go into all the gory details of our relationship. We were in love and, well, I still love him, but I found out clearly he does not. I discovered proof that he has been cheating on me for a while in the form of small home movies of them. I don't know the girl, and from the looks of their conversations, yep, went ahead and post-discovery snooped. She has no idea I exist. Tonight is the biggest night of my boyfriend's life. He's receiving a state award at a big dinner with a few hundred people attending, from his mom and dad to councilmen and all of that. In fact, the only reason I discovered this transgression is because I've been putting together a little video for him to enjoy some of the key moments of his life. You know, typical sappy. I'm burdened with a lot of power right now, and I don't know if I have it in me to do the right thing or if I even know the right thing. I'm blinded with tears of rage, sadness, and betrayal. But at the same time, I love him, have loved him, and do I really want to do this? The relationship is over, no doubt about it. I am not a woman who will take her man cheating on her, certainly not. That's not the issue. The issue is there are cutest selfies of the two of them, a lot of them only shared between the two of them. Nothing LWD. There's plenty of that on camera, though. Do I sneak one into the snap reel as a way of letting him know that I know? Or do I simply confront him after his moment in the sun passes? I'm not going to pick up everything and leave without cutting contact. That's not my style, and it wouldn't make me feel good. Just very sad. Do I do the thing? For once in my life, to anyone looking at the snap reel, it would just look like a picture of him and a friend. But to him and to me, it would be a private message, an outing. Help me, Reddit, I don't know what to do this time. TLDR. Found out BF was cheating on me and have the power to let him know via slipping a photo of the two of them into the snap reel showing tonight. Should I do it or gracefully exit his life? Relevant comments. Comment 1. Nah, you know what? If there's really nothing that anyone would pick up on other than the two of you, you slip that photo into the slideshow, make eye contact with him when the photo appears on screen. Then when it's over, you stand up and walk out. It ain't the high road, but nobody needs to walk the high road all the time. I chuckled. I think the only reason I would do this is to make eye contact with him so that he knows I know, but I'm not sure I have the guts to do that. I'm not exactly Olivia Pope. Update. Well, it's been a month and a half since this all went down. I have gotten so many requests for an update, and I never intended to actually give one, honestly, because I was afraid of the fallout depending on what I ended up doing. So what did I do? I did the immature, vengeful thing, and I don't regret it. I took a few photos of the two of them, tasteful photos that gave off no indication other than she might be a childhood friend. I slipped them into the snap reel, and I spoke kindly of him at the podium. Then, after my turn was finished, I walked out. I drove home feeling calm and in control. 20 minutes later, the text started, "Where did I go? What did I know? Where did I find the photos? Was there more in store for him?" I texted him, "I know you've been her, but there are no more photos." There weren't any. And of course I left it at that. He didn't come home that night or the next. The next day he called me to ask if we could meet and talk at a public location. I agreed to meet him at Starbucks. I arrived early, waited for him. He showed up a few minutes late and took the seat across from me. He started right off with the excuses. How it just happened and he regrets it fully. She doesn't mean anything to him, and that she looked like a girl he had a crush on in high school, and he was powerless against his teenage self. I didn't interrupt him, just let him have his time. When he was done and looking at me for a sign of what might happen next, all I could say was, "So where did you stay the past few nights?" "Her house." "And what did you do?" He wouldn't answer. There hadn't been any doubt in my mind, really. I knew I was leaving him. He talked over himself, apologizing, begging for forgiveness, saying he'd change. I told him that I didn't want him to have to change himself. That if who he was naturally was someone who cheated on his girlfriend, then that's not someone I wanted to be with. He said that he was thinking of proposing to me, and all I could say after that was, "Good thing I found out before." Fast forward to a few weeks later. He's moved out and I'm doing well. We have cut off contact. People ask me about him all the time, and I just let them know he left me for a girl who looked like his high school crush. So that's the end. We are broken up. We are never, ever, ever getting back together. I don't feel any regret for how I handled it. Like one commenter said, "There's no need to take the high road all the time." I added the photos to the snap reel. He saw them. We broke up and are never getting back together. I don't regret my choice, only that I wasted 3 years with an overgrown child. Now on to the next story. Story 9. My boyfriend wants more intimacy, but it's exhausting me. How do I talk to him about it and find a balance? Original post. My boyfriend and I have been together for 2 years now. He is my first relationship and even my first kiss. We met at university during activities, became friends, and then started dating. He is so polite and kind, and also really sweet and smart as well. We can talk about our common interests and hobbies for hours on end. Since I was a virgin in the relationship, he was not. We took it slow and only had sex when I was ready, which was about 8 months after we became a couple. After that, we had sex about once every 1 or 2 weeks, depending on if we found the time during our studies and if we were exhausted. Sometimes during exam time, we had it once a month or every 5 weeks. But slowly, he started to initiate more and more. At first, I didn't mind and loved the attention he was giving me. I felt attractive and beautiful, which helped my body image issues a lot. Soon it turned into him asking for it every single day, sometimes twice a day during weekends or if we have a slow day with little work and studies. A month ago, we went on a vacation together, and he basically jumped on me as soon as we got into our hotel room. We barely got to do anything as he wanted to have sex too, if not 3 times a day. I came back so exhausted from the vacation. I even started saying no to him eating me out or role play or switching in position just to get it over with sooner. At this point, sex does nothing for me anymore. The mere action and physical stimulation feels enjoyable, yes, but just sex without anything else just isn't worth the time or effort for me. I need a story and emotion with it, lots of dirty talk and role-playing in some hot situations. I know that takes time and effort to prepare, but it gets me going wildly. But even if I could have that every day, I wouldn't want it. It's literally physically too exhausting. Also, I feel like too much sex kind of destroys the magic. I know that he takes a lot emotionally and sexually out of sex. It's making him feel loved and desired, and I don't want to take it from him. But I actually caught myself not doing any makeup anymore and not wearing tighter, short clothing, but baggy ones instead to maybe deter him from wanting sex so much. TLDR. My boyfriend started initiating sex more and more. I find it exhausting and can't take it anymore. How do I negotiate fewer sexual encounters without making him feel unloved? Date 1. I spent a lot of time reading through everyone's replies and looking inwards about how I feel. I gathered my thoughts and spent a few days making a list of what I wanted to say. On a weekend when we had planned to spend the day together, I sat him down and told him the following points. I love him to the moon and back and want to show him that I love him, make him feel desired, loved, and appreciated. But having so much sex with such frequency is physically exhausting to me, which causes me to avoid sex and even sex acts I enjoy because I don't have enough energy and motivation to do it. This also causes me to orgasm not as often anymore. I also need time to physically recover before it may even start to become painful. I feel like sex has become the single defining aspect of our relationship, and many other parts like doing activities together, romantic dates, just talking and cuddling, have taken a back seat. I also feel exhausted emotionally and underappreciated from giving as much as I can, which I gladly do for the people I love, while little comes back from the other side of the relationship. I then proceeded to explain the things I like during sex and what makes me go wild, hoping to show him that I still want to have sex with him. I also made a few more compliments just to keep the vibe positive, and because I meant it. He reacted pretty well, all things considered. He listened and let me finish but asked for a little time to think about it. Obviously, I gladly agreed. We spent the rest of the day together without him initiating once. At the end of the day, he said that he wants me to enjoy sex just as much as he does and that he loves me. I was really hopeful. For the next week and a half, we spent our time together like usual, and he asked for sex about 1/2 as often as before our talk. We even had days without sex at all. He also started to ask, "Do you want to have sex with me?" Instead of physically initiating like he did before, like touching me somewhere, hugging me from behind, and similar things. He also stopped asking for pictures of me, and when he did, it were just selfies. I was so happy that I even took the initiative once, and he seemingly loved it when I asked for sex. Then one day, he sat me down with a stern look and said that he hated what this relationship has turned into. To him, it feels like we are now just roommates or platonic friends instead of lovers. He told me that the one time I initiated, after he was overjoyed to finally see me again, his heart was broken because I suddenly wasn't as submissive as usually. I asked to be eaten out and was on top with some more dominant dirty talk, and that all of that is not what he signed up for. He doesn't want to walk on eggshells waiting for me when I'm finally in the mood but has what he deserves in the relationship. Basically, he gave me an ultimatum. Either we return to how it was before the talk, starting right now, or he leaves me. Guess who doesn't have a boyfriend anymore? I spent the last few days bawling my eyes out and eating lots of ice cream and watching some shitty shows. What he said hurt me a lot, and I do not love him anymore, but still the feeling of loss and sadness is all too real. He was my first relationship, and for the past 2 years he was my entire world. Now I have to gather up the broken shards he left behind. TLDR. I took your advice and talked with him about my feelings. He pretended to be okay with it for a while and then left me after demanding more sex again. OP added more info in the comments. Comment 1. I have an update if you want more information. I have a pretty high libido as well, and I love good sensual sex, and I want it quite often as I can go multiple times a week. But it was so often that we basically didn't do anything else besides it, and he was emotionally checked out when the possibility of sex wasn't on the table. It was so much that I was physically uncomfortable, not to mention his really bad behavior once I told him I wanted a break sometimes. I had difficulty saying no because I wanted to make him feel loved that way until I realized that he just wants to take everything he wants from me without giving any emotional connection, romance, or care for me as a person. I hate that people throw around this sexual incompatibility argument because if he said he wanted someone he can have at least 2 a day, anyway he likes, and I can't and don't want to do that, that would be one thing. But he shouted at me, demanded we do it how he likes it, and that I apologize for ruining everything by voicing my concerns for my well-being. He also said that he deserves to just take everything he wants from me. So please keep that in mind when you do your judgment. Yes, we are not together anymore. I cut him off after his scary tantrum. Comment 2. Thank you for your empathy and for the context. I know that my update gave more information, but that's also because I didn't see a lot of the stuff he did to me and didn't do for me after that tantrum. Until that point, I wanted to give everything to him because I was head over heels for him until he showed me that he didn't feel that way back. I get it, I like sex just as much as the next gal. It's just that I have a pretty broad spectrum of frequency I would be okay with depending on what my partner feels like. Sex once a week or 2 weeks, totally fine as long as the other intimacy is fulfilled. Sex every other day, great as well, as long as it's an equal relationship and we both get what we want and non-sexual intimacy isn't pushed to the side, which sadly happened to me in the end. I not only felt really sore and exhausted but also used and reduced to my body. If we broke up because of sexual incompatibility, that would still hurt, but we could part ways amicably. This way, he just hurt me for no reason. Comment 3. I get that sexual incompatibility can be a huge deal breaker for people, but firstly, it's not like we suddenly were not having any sex anymore. In those 10 days between our 2 conversations, we still had sex about 5-6 times plus, making out plus some other sexual stuff besides full-on PIV. Also, it's the way he treated me. He shouted at me, demanded we return to normal by having sex as often as he wants again no matter my feelings, and with me being submissive. He also demanded an apology and an apology session. So much could be inferred, but before all that, for the last weeks and months, he left me emotionally starved. He only looked out for his sexual gratification while I had to cherish the few little drops of romance, friendship, and companionship when it didn't involve sex or could lead to sex. He was kind of emotionally distant. Cute dates, cuddling, and intimacy without sexuality and hobbies together was few and far in between. I don't fault him for not wanting sex. I fault him for how he treated me and how little he was able to compromise. Now on to the next story. Story 10. Am I the a-hole for demanding my husband block his female friend who warned him against marrying me? I, 26, want my husband, 27, to immediately block one of his friends, Kyla, 27. He thinks I'm overreacting and wants opinions from some cool-headed people on if I'm just acting crazy or this is something that would cross the line for you. My husband has a group of 8 friends he has been close with since his college days. Kyla is one of his friends. When my husband and I started dating, he introduced me to all of them, and everyone was very friendly. I used to hang out with them frequently. I am an introvert, and so is my husband. I would always ask him to spend time alone, as being in social settings just saps all my energy away. His friends, and especially Kyla, always made it a point to tell me how he hangs out with them less after he started dating me. Kyla also had a weird energy around me. If I was with my husband, she would be the friendliest with me. However, as soon as he walked away, she acted like I did not exist. My husband hates to be touched by others, we both are in D. But Kyla would always tease him by trying to hug him, mess his hair, etc. I never felt she was flirting with him, but just teasing him to make him annoyed. Overall, she just feels like a person who has a severe social boundary issue. We got married 2 years ago, and things have been great between us. Last week, we had our 2nd marriage anniversary and invited a bunch of people. His friends stayed back after all the guests left, and we were all drinking and chatting. One of his friends, Jen, became a bit tipsy and started complimenting me on how beautiful our house is, how I care for my husband, and how he has changed for the better since marriage. Everyone was laughing at my husband at how much of a slob he was when he was single. Jen then pointed at Kyla and said, "You better pay up, 'cause you had bet that their marriage would not even last for 2 years. Everyone became silent and started changing the topic. I also did not want to spoil the mood and let it go, but it stuck in my head. After everyone left, I asked my husband what Jen was talking about. He also had noticed Jen saying that and was ready with a full explanation. He told me the story of what happened when we got engaged. When he proposed to me, he had not told his friends that he was going to do that. We went on a trip to Puerto Rico, and he surprised me there. We put our engagement pictures on Instagram while we were on the trip, and it was a big surprise to everyone, as we were only dating for 1 year. When he came back and met all his friends, everyone congratulated him. However, Kyla started ranting about how he was a fool to propose so quickly, and she felt that I was not the right girl for him. Seems like she said some unkind things about me, implying I was a gold digger. My husband's family is wealthy, but so is mine. She had said that she bet we would break up within 2 years if we got married. That is why Jen was taunting her about how happy my husband was with me. I was very furious at this point, as I feel this is something he should have told me. I asked him to tell me truthfully if he had ever dated Kyla or had any history with her, as he has always told me that he has never dated anyone from his friend group. He said that he has, of course, not dated or hooked up with Kyla. However, Kyla had asked him out a few times when they were in college, and he always politely declined. I asked why he said no to her, and he said he just does not have any romantic feelings for her. I can see that because my husband does have a type based on me or the other people he has dated in the past, and Kyla is the opposite of that. I am just mad at her for saying bad things about me, especially after knowing that we were already engaged and betting against my marriage. I told my husband that he needs to minimize contact with Kyla, and she is not invited to parties at our house anymore. He feels I'm being too harsh for something she said almost 3 years ago. He also pointed out that she has been very supportive to both of us and also helped a lot during our wedding arrangements. He feels she is just blunt and forthright when she speaks but does not mean those things. He told me to take some time and calm down, and we would revisit this topic in a week. He is worried this will completely change the dynamics within his friend group. Am I the a-hole for wanting him to block her and stop inviting her to our house? Do you think I'm overreacting? I think betting against our marriage and bad-mouthing me behind my back seems like a huge betrayal. I am also mad at my husband that he kept this fact from me and also never told me that Kyla asked him out during college days. Am I just being crazy and reactive? How would you react in this situation? I don't want to distance my husband from his friends, but I also do not want to see that Kyla's face again. Update. I had posted almost 6 months ago regarding my husband's friend Kyla betting that our marriage would not last for more than 2 years. I was upset and had asked my husband to stop talking to her because she disrespected our marriage. Since then, Kyla has pulled some really pathetic stunts to stir up issues between my husband and me. After I wrote the post, my husband was trying to convince me that Kyla was just joking when she made those comments and it happened so long ago. Kyla messaged me the next day, apologizing for her comments and also not making more efforts to connect with me. I accepted her apology and started warming up to her. She started inviting me for brunches and girls' nights out with them, and I felt included in their friend group. One day during brunch, I brought up why Kyla really thought our marriage would not work out. Kyla told me that my husband broke up with his long-term ex-girlfriend, Joanna, 2 months before he started dating me. I knew that part, but Kyla told me that my husband was really heartbroken after the breakup and swore to her that he would stay away from dating anyone. When he met me, my mom set us up on a blind date. She was surprised how quickly we hit it off. Kyla thought that I was his rebound relationship, but when he proposed to me within a year, she was worried that he was making a very rash decision. My husband's family is rich, and she thought it was unwise for him to marry so quickly without knowing me well. She did not know enough about me and that my family is also very well off. That is why she was concerned that I was taking advantage of his vulnerable state. She apologized to me and said that it was wrong for her to assume that, and over the years, she has seen how happy we are together. I appreciated her honesty, and Kyla and I became good friends since then and started hanging out more frequently. Around 2 months ago, my husband went to a conference in Seattle for 3 nights. After he came back, I got a "Hey girly" message on Instagram from Joanna, his ex. She told me that my husband contacted her a few months ago and they met in Seattle during the conference, and she could give me more proof if I wanted. I went through my husband's Instagram, but he seems to have blocked her. I made a mistake of mentioning it to Kyla, as she was the only person honest to me about Joanna, and she went into detective mode to help me. She was still friends with Joanna on Instagram, as they all went to college together, and opened her profile. The message sent to me was from a different profile with no followers. We checked her photos, and we saw that she attended the same conference as my husband did in Seattle. Kyla suggested I should ask Joanna for more proof and also asked my husband about the same before assuming the worst. I asked my husband if he met Joanna, and he said yes. He told me he just met her in the expo hall and chatted with her for a few minutes. I asked him why he did not mention it to me, and he told me it was just a quick conversation and he did not think too much of it. He asked me how I knew it, and I told him that Kyla mentioned that she saw her pictures at the conference, and I thought he might have seen her. I messaged Joanna again to share more proof, as she told me that they have been chatting for the past 2 months and planned to attend the conference together. She shared a log of their messages where my husband was actively flirting with her. The screenshots did look legit, but I did not see any of those messages in my husband's Instagram profile. I talked to Kyla about it as I did not know what to believe. I messaged Joanna to tell us what happened between them, and she told me that he invited her to the room at nights and they hooked up, but she does not have any photos as he insisted they do not take any pictures together. I immediately realized it was fake and messaged Joanna to EFF off. She kept on insisting they were telling the truth, and she spent the nights with my husband in his room on all 3 nights. I told her that my husband and I were playing video games, Sea of Thieves, for almost 2 or 3 hours each night after his dinner, as that is what we do to catch up when he is away. Unless Joanna was sitting behind him watching us play until he fell asleep, she was full of it. I also told my husband about the whole incident, and he told me I should have come to him sooner. He told me that he has gone no contact with Joanna ever since they broke up, and he just ran into her at the conference. He told me I could check his phone and everything to verify that he has blocked her everywhere. I told him I do not need to, and Joanna might have run into him and just decided to EFF his life by making up stuff. When all the friends met that weekend, my husband and I told everyone about how Joanna sent messages to me and faked everything. Kyla was also telling what happened, as she had told her about it. Kyla accidentally let it slip out that, "It's luckily we are nerds and played video games at nights before sleeping." Else props go to Joanna for making up a convincing story. I never told Kyla about the video game stuff. I just told her Joanna is full of it, and I blocked her. Took me until I came home to connect the dots. I told my husband about it, and he confronted Kyla. She denied it and told him that I told her about the video game stuff on a phone call, but I don't remember doing it. We have since decided to keep our distance from Kyla. Kyla has called me multiple times to meet up, but I just make up reasons that I am busy. I do not know why she did it, but at this point, I am not interested in it, and we have decided to just see her on social occasions and avoid hanging out with her as much as possible. I feel stupid that she played me for a fool, and I should have not gone to her when Joanna started messaging me. In hindsight, it seems suspicious that Kyla started telling me about Joanna, and at the same time, Joanna claimed to have an affair with my husband. I do not know what her intentions are, but I am mad enough that I will avoid her as much as possible. I wish I had some real proof that she was the one messaging me so that I could expose her. I also feel bad for suspecting my husband, but I am glad my husband and I are on the same page now. We have reached the end. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this, and give us your thoughts about the stories in the comments section. Thank you and see you in the next video.